Welcome, everybody. Today is February 8th, 2023. This is an instant planning board workshop regarding the proposed form-based code in the city of Kingston. Members present, we have myself, Wayne Platt, Robert Jacobson, Archer, Sage Newkirk. We also have Suzanne Cahill, the city planner, Tyler Viday is the assistant planner, Assistant Corporation Council Matt Jankowski, Alderman Michael Berry, the Common Council liaison for the planning. Tonight's session is going to be dealing with Article 4, proposed Article 4 general standards. We have our packet before us that's been handed to us. And as we can go through page by page here, we get a specific
No,
plan as far as.
we sent it out earlier to everybody. We did provide you a hard copy. If you have any specific questions, we just encourage you to bring them up. I just, a couple of clarifications that I had asked about. Some of these have, when you start off, show the required pedestrian access. And my preference would be to encourage all pedestrian access from the front street sidewalk. So there may be some adjustments there.
Okay.
I've been speaking with architects about making some changes on a couple of those in that respect. Just another clarification where it says required private living space dimensions. Even though it says no requirement, there is a requirement in the open space section that has, and I can read it, at least 10% of the gross, at least 10% of the gross floor area of sites 5,000 square feet or greater that includes residential development will be comprised of usable open space. So usable open space is a little different than private open space. Private open space would be exactly what that states. It's private to that particular, those particular occupants. However, private open space can be part of a usable open space. So there still is the usable open space.
Where publicly when?
Yeah.
So as we go, thank you, Sue.
So that's just a.
All right. So as we go through each of the sections here, you could, Kyle, you're going to provide us with an overlay map of.
I think so.
Okay.
You know what the topic is.
All right. So first one is Main Street building.
And you're going to go through the building types, right? Is that what you're
Is that
doing? Yeah.
Which is-
Unless, I mean, I don't know, do you have any particular questions? I know that this has been sent out, it discusses each of the different types, building types. This is something new to the code. We don't have anything of this nature in our current one. It just discusses them, gives some specifics about their densities, the lot dimension widths that would be required.
Now, when you see building width, 150 max, I mean, that's the maximum width of the actual building itself, not the lot.
Correct.
And then if someone wants to construct wider than that, what would that be? Require it?
We would have to go to this other page, but there would be waivers. So click
Is that enough?
2.5, where it refers you, in that particular one, it says buildings that meet the requirements for wide buildings. So see section 405.14.c.4. That is actually page 4.25. I already looked that up.
And these minor waivers, they come across this board?
No.
Just a-
No, minor waivers will not, major waivers come to
Okay,
this
so this is
board.
all before that other.
Yeah.
The other thing.
Minors do, and
But if somebody's building a building that requires a site plan, if they wouldn't necessarily be before us because if they meet the code, that's why they.
correct, that's the distinction, yes. not all site plans will go to the planning board.
So if you want, if you want to talk about each building type, I can pull up the locations where that building type would be allowed.
Show the map.
If that's where you want.
Yeah, just
I
to-
think I can
yeah.
manage that, might take me a second.
We could.
So we're talking about Main Street buildings, right?
And it looks like this takes up quite a bit of, this got uptown here, we got West Grand.
So these would be the sections that would allow Main Street buildings. And then if you want to see what the Main Street, you're looking at the section that tells you the Main Street building.
One of these, or there's a lot of material in this article.
That's just Main Street, right? This,
These are just the Main Street buildings.
all right.
The first couple, like the Main Street, the flex building, these look similar to what, when you building, what we have. The ones that I saw and the ones that I saw that I'm not used to seeing in the city was the stacked flats.
Okay.
Courtyard buildings
So let's look at,
and the multiplex.
okay, so let's go to
Those are kind of
those.
new.
They are, they're
You talking about like cottage?
No,
No,
it's
the
stacks.
Tax
When you
flat,
start getting into multifamilies, like these larger apartment complexes,
4.6, 4.7,
then you see where they're allowed.
4.8.
The circle.
Kyla, can you pull up where the stacked flats would be allowed?
Yeah, so that's this.
Looks like T5 and only one of the T4.
Just one little section there?
T5, it's that, everything that's colored there.
T5,
the purple
SD,
and the-
Too.
Oh, okay.
So all along the waterfront, basically up Broadway, Stockade.
T4.
So the stacked flats can overlap the Main Street building area.
Right, you have on that first page, the first page of the article has the table
Okay, all
that
right.
kind of lists all of the building types, and then it goes across the different transects
Yeah.
and shows you in which transects they would be allowed.
So yeah, Sage pointed out this section on Delaware Avenue.
And I see T4s in Albany Avenue too.
Correct.
It's only in T4, T4 Main
Dark
Street.
is the
Just T4 Main
T4
Street.
Main Street.
which is the only.
The only T4 Main Streets are really there
I think it's just Delaware.
and Delaware. Yeah,
Albany
No.
Avenue.
right, just Delaware's, that's the only
Yeah.
one. Then you have the T4 and O, which is along Albany, you've got it up in this area. Which I will say, we talked to Bartek and that, and about extending, changing this area, and they liked that idea.
Out in Washington?
Yeah, that we talked about last month. Stacked flats pretty much are your, all of your T5s. they are allowed in the special district, the waterfront as well. So you see that down below. And that T4 Main Street, which is just in the Delaware Avenue area.
And down in the country.
No, that's a T4NO, so that would not allow for stacked flats.
Oh, I see. It's different.
Yep.
No, there's T4.
So your courtyard buildings, you asked about those. Those are really only allowed in 3 of the transects, T5 Flex, T5N, and the special district waterfront as well.
With the courtyard.
So your courtyard building is this style here on page 4.7.
Now, why is it? And I'm just asking, when you look at a courtyard building versus a stacked flat, a courtyard building seems to have more green space than a stacked flat. Why is that in less districts? Wouldn't a courtyard be more advantageous because it has green space? I mean, or are they just much larger than a stacked flat? What's the size?
I think, well,
It's the same size, it's that the courtyard has more open space.
your stacked flats, they don't require more, quite frankly. They both have 0 required private open space, so they both would have that 10% rule. They both would require the same amount of open space.
So you
The districts that they took it out of were the Main Street districts where they want like continual frontage.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
The only one that really, I think the only project that really resembles it is the one on Miller's Lane that kind of has that.
You know,
No.
also the one down here in
Paris.
Asbrook
Um,
where Repco did that. You know, it's the brick building.
Yeah,
It has a courtyard
Yeah.
between. It's kind
yeah.
of that feel.
But it's pretty much the same except. Not the-
Multiplex, right, is just,
not in the Main Street.
It's allowed in the T4s.
right, and that gets into, it leaves out the T4 Main Street,
It's T4 Main Street.
and then it's so small, and then it just brings in the other T4s, and the only one that's not allowed on is, or the, up above that would be the T5 Main Street, so. And none of the T3s. The only, the red is, changes from the second draft to the third draft.
Okay.
Okay, so like here you see red,
Yeah,
so that's just a change to the third draft. So this special district was added in the third draft, so that's why it's in red.
so this means that these buildings here would be allowed in here, it's just a change.
Yeah. It's just to identify what has been brought, what has been changed since the last draft. So it's just a clarity. Okay,
So just to point out, this one allows for multiple units up to 12 maximum in the T4 and up to 18 maximum in the T5. So the blues would allow up to 12 maximum.
I don't know if you can repeat, but what did we say last meeting with affordable? How many units triggers you?
right now it is set up as 7. It's being proposed as 7. It's currently 5, but the limit now it starts at 7 in this proposal. It's-
5 to 7. So when you look at a multiplex that says it could be 7 to 18, a multiplex would trigger, what, one affordable?
One, if they had seven.
And seven would trigger one.
And that's why they moved to the number 7, because this building type would trigger the affordable.
And then is this code changing the parks,
Changing
the park recreation fee? Is that changing with the new code?
no,
'Cause what's that, that's only at
That's 3,000 per unit over 4.
over 4. So is that's staying the same?
I don't believe that has changed at all. Matt, do you know?
Yeah, but the section, the recreation fee is in another section of the code, which I think is staying, not in the zoning code.
So if somebody's in a 4th family or in a residential zone, they have to pay the rec fee, but they wouldn't
First
have.
4 units are exempt.
to.
Yeah, that, where the code reads.
So 5 and 6 pay the rec fee, 7, then you start getting affordable with the rec fee. Is there a rec fee on the affordable units?
Yeah.
No, there's not, it's staying.
Hmm?
Staying the same.
No, I was talking about the one on Hasbro, which you might not even, it was
You know where the
Jamaican restaurant.
Jamaican restaurant. Yeah, cool.
If you go up Hasbrook, a couple of houses, there's a brick,
Yes.
kind of loops around, there's a little courtyard in there.
It's right out the back of here. so.
Yes.
Any other questions on the building types? In the T3s, you want to go through those, they get into the cottage, porch, or duplex, and detached houses.
I just have a question on the row house.
Okay, row houses?
So if somebody comes into this row house, that would be like a 3, 4, 5 lot subdivision, because typically with a row house, they would be individual units. They,
I don't
Talking about
know,
apartment
I don't necessarily think it's subdivision. No,
the row house could be either, they typically, a row house, you actually
well,
own.
like, the Spring Street project, Tubby Row, would be, that's a style row house. The one on Henry Street, the head of Henry Street, Broadway,
Yeah,
that's a row house
but
style.
somebody could also go in and do a row house where they actually sell the actual house. House 1, house 2.
Right, but
You're
these,
talking about like different SBLs?
you're not required to subdivide.
No, what I'm saying is, when you see the row house in this,
So
it could either be one big building that's apartments, or it could be individual units that
They
somebody
could
could sell houses.
subdivide it, yes, I mean, it could
sort of
be
like
subdivided.
Broadway, 30 Broadway, right? That's-
Correct, right, like in the
So row
RSA.
houses are allowed in which district?
The row houses
T4 and
are, well, they're allowed in T5 flex, T5N. They're allowed in the waterfront, they're allowed in all the T4s, and that's it.
Did you talk about small, you don't do small multiplex, yeah, right, because this would be,
We kind of skipped over that.
if you want to see small multiplex, this would be the map.
Your small multiplex,
So in the T3s, it would be 4, up to 4 units, and in the T4 and 5, it would be up to 6 units. But in the T4 and 5, you could also go up to larger multiplex, which would be 7.
Multiplex is basically throughout the whole city.
um,
You're hitting all the residential neighborhoods.
with the exception of the main streets, the small multiplex we're talking.
Yeah, and
With the
the
exception of the main streets and then your T3L and your T2.
conservation areas.
I think this is the one you're gonna, this is, goes back to our conversation last week. You're putting 6 units in residential neighborhoods, typically single family. That's a big difference.
Some, a great deal of them are rated a triple R too.
Many of them are triple R single family. So that's where you're, that's where I think you're gonna have issues with the residents, because obviously some people want infiltration of units, but you have other people in single family neighborhoods that don't want a 6-unit apartment house next to them. What are the parking requirements?
Can we see just the T3s? What are just the T3s? If you take the, because the regular multiplex.
The T3N, right, you're looking at,
Yeah, I mean, the regular multiplexes are in
Can
the
you get rid of
T4s,
the layer
right?
button, the layered box?
Oh, move it, yeah.
So you've got Clifton, everybody on top of Clifton, from Foxhall to East Chester Street. You've got Roosevelt Park. You've got basically Uptown, Pearl Johnson,
Because this is the section we're most
Grandview.
concerned about.
and then you've got, what's the other section down by the Rondo? You've got West Chestnut and over by Mary's Avenue and Brewster Street, all of those streets, neighborhoods around the high school.
and some of these are the large parcel ones too.
Right.
What are they listed as?
That's the T3NO.
Yeah.
Those are the ones you can see are the darker. Like that darker orangish color there.
Which the one off of Albany Avenue is in the flood zone. Actually, no, is that, some of this, so you could have somebody take a single family house on Albany Avenue, tear it down and put a 6-unit on your Albany Avenue corridor. Or take one of the large Victorian houses and renovate it and turn it into a 6-unit.
Well, I think, that's one thing maybe we can talk about is, we don't want to encourage the infrastructure to be demolished and then new construction to be rebuilt in order to
That's what
create
will
more
happen.
units. I think we want to see
Somebody's gonna buy a
units
single,
actively reused or,
yeah, because I mean, somebody will buy a single family house, pay
Right.
single family dollars for a lot, turn around, and put a 6-unit on it.
Can you pull up, I'll just use my 12 Sylvester. On like a Google Street view.
On Google,
Yeah. That's considered the best.
Where's
Well, they-
Sylvester's where?
By Hutton. Oh, between
It's
East
right
Chester
there.
and Clifton. Oh, yeah,
Whole
so,
section.
so this is the example that I have, if you go to
What?
street, yep, click on that.
I have a huge house next door to me.
Yeah, so the house to the left, that's an old picture, but anyway, the house to the left right there, okay? They moved up, they split, one's only living there right now with the possibility of selling it. Now theoretically, someone can buy that, level it, and put a 6-plex right there. There, you're not gonna renovate that to make 6
Well, I
units, so someone could
I
level
also
it.
think, though,
Yeah.
that's not just, I think we have to think beyond just the use. I mean, this is, the whole concept of the form-based code is also looking at how new construction would fit into the current environment and the compatibility.
here's-
So
But you have
in
an
a-
older city with older housing
Right,
stock and
so
older
you're
buildings,
gonna,
so,
you're gonna be looking at the form of the street. You're not just looking at plopping a
Well, here's
a
the-
huge
well, if
building in
you-
the middle.
Pull up 72 Elizabeth Street. You know the house that's across
But
from
with
me.
an older city and older buildings, it's sometimes cost prohibitive to renovate these to meet current
I
code.
get that.
So you could take those 2 houses, buy those 2 houses at, 200 grand,
72 Elizabeth.
400 grand, you've got a
There's a
large
house
vacant
that's kitty
parcel,
corner
and
from
you just
me.
put a 6-family on it. Build new, everything's brand new, all new facilities.
You wouldn't even
That's
need
what-
to buy those parcels, what I'm saying is.
You wouldn't,
my
but I'm
neighbor
just saying,
could
that's what's gonna
theoretically
happen.
Level
If you
that,
have-
yeah,
if you.
You know, that's what I'm saying, the
this-
developer comes in and says, listen, I'll give you 300,000
Wait,
here.
but like what I'm saying, that you still have, there are still
See, there.
building constraints. I mean, there's
That
still
one.
setback requirements and there still are height
This one.
requirements.
Right,
and there
but,
still are.
but our point is you're gonna take single-family neighborhoods, you're gonna knock two
I
houses down,
understand,
you're gonna
I
have 6
understand.
units.
Right.
So this house
That's
is
what
across
developers
the
do.
street from me.
Does that Dennis Connors' place?
Yeah, it was Denny, I mean, Denny's no longer with us, yeah, he passed. But I mean, that's the Connors place. So if the Connors decided at this point to sell, I mean, Denny was my uncle, they lived across the street from us. So if the Connors decide to sell at this point, which, you know, they could, the kids are in there, you could easily renovate that into units at this point,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
No,
you know? And I could
with
have,
minimal work, because
with
they're
minimal
gonna
work,
board up archways, they're gonna use staircases for
with,
second floor.
with minimal work, and I could have they could have 6 units in there, the minimal across the street.
That's the problem with going into some of the single-family neighborhoods. You can also go up on, let's say you go up on, Grandview or Lounsbury, some of those are large parcels. Somebody could come in and buy one house that has a larger parcel
Across the street.
and put a single.
I mean, that's like a, you know, that's a legitimate concern of ours, you know, if at this point, you know, the market is hot, if, you know, Valerie wants to sell the house, then.
But this is, I mean, someone in real estate, when you look at areas like Rockland County, Westchester County, Long Island, it's so expensive down there that the money isn't sometimes in the land. It's not in the structure that's on the premise. So a developer is gonna look at basically the lots and say, how big, can I meet the setbacks, what is it? They don't care necessarily with the houses, they just want it for the land. And that's when you start having neighborhoods transform, because knock down, build up, knock down.
Well, and with that, their son owns the house next door too, so you've got 2 parcels next door to each other,
And I mean, if you knock down the right house in the right neighborhood, you're gonna have some high rent, because now you've got an apartment in a very nice
Well,
location that's gonna
again,
have
I think that what
Demand
we need
top dollar,
to think about
$2,000,
is
$3,000, $4,000 a month.
maybe look at the requirements, you know, what demolition, you know, I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but I mean, if you're in a historic district, there are some protections, or if you're historically designated,
there-
there are protections, but
Those areas
no,
are not,
I know.
They're not
So I'm
historic
saying that maybe there is something to think, we can look and see, you know, how other communities what they might do to deter that. I mean, that is something to think about, you know. Obviously, I don't think we want to encourage demolition of the infrastructure, the housing stock. I think we want to encourage its, you know, reuse.
well, I mean, but the advocates for creating more housing, will say, well, you're getting rid of one single-family house that has one family, you're replacing it with 6 units, now that you can put 6 families in. The question then becomes, what about the other people in the neighborhood? They want a single-family neighborhood full of houses, do they want a 6-unit next to them with no parking requirements?
So
But you're assuming that every parcel can be converted to a 6-family too, and
They can.
No, I.
Money, you can buy a house, if it's on the right size parcel, you can, or you can buy 2 houses and combine them. That's what developers do. So if you're gonna put this kind of housing in these neighborhoods, that's why you
Well, I
have
guess the
single.
one thing that Sue's just trying to say is that to try to maintain the character, there are certain requirements to maintain the characters in neighborhoods. I'm not saying it's not out of the realm of possibility, because it is open for the greater development.
Absolutely.
But there are theoretically some controls in place to try to maintain the character of each individual neighborhood. But I don't think that anyone disagrees with what the different interests are at play. But if you guys are not supportive of it as written, what is the alternative? So part of what you guys are supposed to do is to look at this and try to give the council some alternatives. So if you have suggestions for
think-
changes or compromises.
This goes back to
or-
our conversation last week. I don't think that the minimum in these neighborhoods should be 4 and 6 families. I think you have some single family neighborhoods that should
What
stay
do you
1 and 2
think
families.
what do you think the minimum should be?
I think you have to look at this, at the actual neighborhood and look at the size of the lots and look at the type of housing that's in it. I mean, you look at Roosevelt Park, I mean, my street, every house is a 50-foot lot. I mean, the practicality is you have this here, but you're not gonna be able to fit it on a 50-foot lot. This type of housing, but can you buy 3 houses or 4 houses and then do it? Yeah.
Well.
So if you're allowing 6 units in that neighborhood, the only way you can get to 6 houses in that neighborhood is by buying up the properties and combining them to make larger tracts of land, which is what developers do.
But there are maximums on lot size. So your maximum, I think your maximum lot size is 100-foot width. So you wouldn't be able, you
So you buy
could
2
do it
houses?
with 2 50-foot properties, but you wouldn't be able to buy, let's say, a block and combine them all.
No,
Or restrictions
no, what
on-
they're gonna do is they're gonna buy up and then they're gonna whack them exactly how they need it through subdivision, which is allowed.
So you would be looking at, let's say, I don't know what the measurements are, but 100-foot width. And then you have to take into account the open space requirements, the setback requirements, the maximum height. So those kinds of restrictions would restrict somewhat what it looks like and what you could actually fit in it. I'm not saying that you wouldn't have multifamily in currently single-family districts, but you wouldn't be able to buy up, multiple lots and create, a gigantic 6-family.
No, but
That's
you can buy up the lots that you need, create your 6 family, buy up a couple more, create your next 6 family. Next thing you know, you've taken out single families and you've converted them to 6 units. In
Yeah, I mean,
neighborhoods
yeah,
that are,
I'm not
in
saying
neighborhoods that are
that's
targeted
not-
by
you can absolutely do
developers
that with two
for
family
high
homes,
rents. That's what's gonna happen.
So
And you
I
also have
guess-
existing houses
Okay,
size.
so getting back to
Yeah.
Matt's point, what would be something that you feel would be, I mean,
I think 6 units is too much in some of these residential neighborhoods. I think it's too dense. They're not dense neighborhoods.
So what types of recommendations do you want to then potentially provide? At least we're not doing it
I
today, but
think-
at least so
no, I
that
think you
when you
have
guys
some-
are considering things together, it's like, okay, here's what Rob's proposing, here's what different changes so that there are potential options and maybe we can kind of.
I mean, I think- so you should-
Compromise.
I mean, I think,
Yeah.
which obviously certain people don't want, but I think you should still have some single-family neighborhood, single-family, but allow accessory dwelling units and have a percentage size with design standards.
okay, so you're almost talking maybe about adding another transect is what you're looking at.
Absolutely.
And looking at neighborhoods for that, okay.
Or eliminating
Well,
some of the
you've
building
eliminated,
types.
what is it, what are the single-family neighborhoods right now called? Triple R,
R1.
R1.
R2.
R2 is two-family.
No, R2 is 2-family.
Yeah, but you got single families in there.
Well, yeah, but I think he's saying just, that's the,
Do you want me to pull up the current zoning map? So so you could talk about adding another transect, or you could talk
or
about
taking out
limiting building
the,
types.
right, taking out that small multiplex out of the T3N. If you remove the small multiplex out of the T3N, then you remove that. If that, I mean, that's that's a different option.
You don't have to decide that right now,
No, it's just, that's something.
and also we only have 4 members out of
Right,
the group.
I mean,
Yeah, I don't think
I mean,
any
if you,
decisions.
if you have a single-family neighborhood and you allow accessory dwelling units to a certain size, that is in essence 2-family. You have two families that are living in the neighborhood. I mean, if you don't have parking restrictions, you start putting 3 families,
So just in looking at this map, the R1 is the light yellow. The triple R is the dark blue. And the double R is the light green. So you'd be
and
looking.
those are huge swaths of the city that are going from single-family now up to 6 units. And that's a radical change for some neighborhoods.
Can we identify what areas that we're looking to maintain the integrity, like?
I think
what our
Kyla had that
traditional
up
neighborhood
before.
is right now?
well, yeah, I mean, that's, if that's what you want, like, you would you're either looking at creating another transect or like Kyla suggested, which is not a bad idea, if that's what you really want to achieve, taking this small multiplex option out of the T3N.
Because a lot of the dark blue, the triple R, to go back to that,
But see,
There's a
small
lot of-
multiplex could work in a lot of those
yeah,
areas.
because there's some of them that are not like you know, the dense neighborhood, the neighborhoods that we're thinking, Roosevelt Park, you know, Linderman,
Right, they're large
Yeah.
pieces of property, you're saying.
yeah.
They're just not, they're all smaller parcels.
You're talking about the larger pieces on Linderman and.
Yeah, like a lot of the dark blue has, like, there's hardly any streets, and where your cursor, the arrow is right there right now, you know, there's,
Some of it's flood zone too.
yeah.
I mean, see the blue that's up above Albany Avenue, that's all flood,
The majority of
back-
that's flood.
except for the houses along Albany Avenue.
Yep.
I'm just concerned about converting existing housing stock and existing buildings to 3, 4, 5, 6 units that got us in trouble back in the 60s and 70s. And I think that this new code is gonna get us in trouble again 10, 15 years from now. With having parking issues, infrastructure issues, garbage issues.
And you talk about how any new construction would blend in with the neighborhood, right? Who,
Okay.
That'll be part of,
but who is the oversight of that?
well, if it goes to the planning board will review it.
But
I mean, it
a lot of
becomes
stuff's not
an
covered.
arbitrary and capricious matter where, you know, our opinion is gonna be contrasted with developer's opinion, and who wins that battle?
But the thing is, let's say you have this T3 district, somebody wants to put a 6-unit up, they buy 2 lots at 50 feet apart, they tear down a house. If they go through and combine the lots and they meet the setbacks, there's no reason to come before us.
I agree with you.
So there's no oversight. They file for a building permit, they meet New York State building code.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, I
I
think
don't
that would
think you
still,
can lump it that way.
Well, tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, if it's in the code and they have a right to do it as a matter of
Right
right.
now, the way, and we went through this last month, or last week when we reviewed it, but the type, what goes to the minor and the major, I guess.
Right,
This is
so-
the administrative section. A minor site plan would be developments that are deemed to be secret type 2s. Development of land less than 2 acres in size or consisting of 1 or 2 lots. And a special use permit, but the special use permits request shall follow major site plan,
I believe the secret, I
except for the renewal.
think the secret type 2 is 1, 2, and 3 families. So I think above that, I don't know,
Yeah.
I don't. off
So
the
if
top
you
of my
do
head.
above a 3-family, you have to have secret review, so it's going to come before the planning board?
I believe so.
What if it's an existing house that's getting converted within the interiors of the wall? That would be no action required.
I think that would still be, I
We'd
think
have
the
to look
only
at the
thing that are
secret regs.
residential, that, yeah, I'm not looking it up.
I guess that's just what I'm trying to understand, like, you know, you have a Victorian house on Albany Avenue, somebody decides to convert it to a 6-unit. because they can. What's the process and what's the checks and balance?
Secret type 2 list.
You're talking about the new zone.
Well, yeah, I mean, if this were enacted and a 6-unit is allowed in, let's say, Albany Avenue, and somebody buys a single-family house and converts it, what board are they going, who has what oversight, if any?
There's a bunch of them already.
Well, Kyla's got up right
It's
now.
more than 6.
Is
right?
that the type 2 list?
How did that?
I think that,
That's all grandfather, those all predate zoning.
Okay.
This,
So,
she's
I
looking
think
right
this is-
there.
construction or expansion of a single, 2-family, or 3-family on an approved lot. So if it's over a 3-family, I think it would come to planning board. As a major site plan.
But even if it comes before us as a major site plan, if they meet the requirements, what are we? We're reviewing the,
You do have, I mean, that's the whole purpose of the form-based is to look at the architecture, look at the setting, look at the green space. You're gonna have more, I think, oversight with the form-based, because it's
Have
just,
more teeth?
it's dealing with more architectural, more visual, more aesthetic than you have right now. Right now, you have
I
a
know,
lot of zero.
that's been the problem over the years, that's why I'm just
And that's, so
concerned.
that this is giving you more of that visual type of review.
Now, are there parking requirements or no parking requirements?
The parking is what we're gonna talk about tonight. There are parking requirements for some uses, yes.
We probably should move on to the next
Yeah.
topic, because unless anyone has any specific.
I'm going back to this map, I've had people that have come up to me that are in single-family neighborhoods, and they're not liking the fact that
Okay,
a six-unit
okay,
building.
so then we need to propose what you feel needs to be changed or modified, if that's what you want to make a recommendation. The board, I mean, you can propose it to the board, we can lay things out. I think what we're gonna end up doing is having another workshop session to talk about more of the code that we have not gone through, or won't be able to get to tonight, and then we'll have a last workshop session, most likely, to just kind of do a wrap up. And then in that session, we'll be talking about what types of recommendations we want to make, so that when you go to your next meeting after that, you'll be making a formal recommendation to the council.
Do you want to skip to parking? Or do you want to go through architectural design standards, waterfront overlay? Frontage type.
Page of that.
Well, if you continue on, you go through frontage type standards, so that's what's
Architecture and site design standards, they're on page 4.24.
When people bring these projects forward, we've never really had design standards. Is your office, is this where we go back to the manpower, because you're needing somebody to go through these plans, verify that they meet all these requirements? Or is that a building department function?
It'll be happening in our office. It'll be our office, doing a lot of the reviewing. We're the point.
But you're gonna need,
And determining, first, the first determination is major, minor, and then from there, it'll go to the boards, and we'll be reviewing
but even
it
if
for
it's
the boards.
minor, you still have to review.
Yes, you do,
So you're
yes,
gonna need help.
yes, we've talked about that, yes.
No, we've talked about it, but I mean, again, the purpose of these meetings, I mean, it's becoming more and more clear how much you're gonna need. This is a tremendous amount.
That could be a recommendation.
That would be a
No, but
recommendation.
that's why I'm talking about as a board member. I know it's, hard for you to sit there and say, I need more help. Everybody needs more help in the city, but you adopt this plan, there's no way you have the manpower to do this. You guys struggle with what you have on your plate now. To go through all these design standards and all the blueprints and architect plans and verify that everything meets the code.
Your application materials are gonna look a lot different when they come to you.
Now, the question, and I'm just asking as a board member, I don't know, is this something that has to be done in-house, or are there companies or consultants that the developer, if we put in a code, can pay them to check their plans versus the code, so when it comes to you, you have an approval, right?
I mean, I think it's supposed to be done either way, but the intent is to have it done in-house.
Well, our recommendation would be to, certainly give consideration to the amount of time that's gonna be needed to.
Well, the recommendation, you could include in your recommendation staffing. I mean, that.
Well, that's why I'm having a conversation, because as we go through, it's evident that you need staffing, but you need, the word I'm looking for, but you need some serious experience. I mean, you just can't pull somebody off the street to do this. Somebody really has to have the planning, urban background like you and Kyla. If we were to read this code and read these plans and look at all of this. I mean, would that be like one full-time job for somebody, I mean, the officer,
Well, right now, you have a provision that allows to have consultants.
We do.
Right? Is that based on the size of the job, or is it based on
No,
what you think?
it's not, it's,
matters or not?
it allows us to ask for outside consulting when the specialty is not something that can be handled
And that
in-house.
cost is
So
passed on
like
to
the
the
traffic
developer?
impact study, yes.
Yeah.
Like
that
we
stuff
did the
is,
traffic
but
impact study.
reviewing and going through all of this, I mean, plus she's not gonna have as much time because she's now responsible for a whole minor board that she's now running. So I mean, is this like a whole another planner position? Or two?
I'll think about that. It's
And that's why I'm having the
definitely a new position. I would think that.
I think you need a full planner based on this, and I mean, let's be honest, the city has been growing since the 10 years I've been on. So every project's bigger, more complicated, and it's requiring more of your time.
So whatever gets
Well,
passed.
Hopefully, we will be removing some of these small things that come through the office right now, like
Right.
like the signage review that we do, the, heritage and landmarks reviews, every sign application that comes through a historic district. There's some of these minor things that are going to be taken.
They're taken away from the board, but who's reviewing them?
I mean, it would still pass through, but
That's
it
my-
wouldn't be,
that's my
it
point.
wouldn't be setting and agenda.
Plus you have-
publication,
Plus, you're gonna have a minor
as well
board that they're now meeting, discussing like the planning board and
Well,
reviewing.
we've discussed alternatives to that.
Right.
That would be easier for scheduling.
And I think one thing that you will see is that applicants are going to likely be expected to have their own architect or engineer stamp, submit stamped plans, which right now not every applicant does. But if you are proposing to meet these, I think
They're gonna have to be
They're
knowledgeable.
Going to need
with this.
architects.
yeah, I mean, the regular person isn't going to be able to sketch this out, I don't think. So that we're not gonna know until
You start down this road.
Yeah.
but-
until we
No, I
get
understand,
there,
I
I
just,
think, but
I mean, just as a planning board member, I see the work that you guys have done the past 10 years. I see how much busier we are. I see a lot coming off the plate of the planning board as members, but I'm not seeing it's coming off our plate, it's going on your plate. So,
And some of the ideas that the applicant coming in too will have an architect that will look at this, they will come in with something right off the bat that meets the code. Or at least is, right now, you've seen how much
Yeah.
back and, people come in with plans and they change, it takes months to have back and forth with them and meetings with them, this
I
hopefully.
think, right, I think what Kyla's saying is that this basically gives them more
Of a blueprint.
information of what we're looking for. I mean, this lays out the expectations. So I think it's almost lays it out for them, you give us this and you'll be okay. Do we want to, we've got a lot of ground to cover here.
Parking,
Well,
or do you wanna go?
we still, does anybody want to do the architecture and site design standards? I don't know if you've looked at those. They talk about, facade composition is there. It speaks to building materials, it speaks to spacing, different components of the building structure themselves, the sills, the caps, the windows.
I mean, I'll be honest, I scanned this, it all looks great and looks beautiful. To a certain extent, I have to rely on this consultant that did the work. I mean, this is, I mean, I'm not an architect, so I,
Okay,
I'm looking at this and
There'll still be some latitude with the planning board as far as colors. That thing,
yeah, colors is a tough one. Yeah.
we've done, we've done
Yeah.
colors in the past, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it goes through lighting. I mean, there's a lot of information in here in this new code that we don't have right now. So
Correct.
this is really refining and telling people what they can, present. And it's not left to staff to tell them, this type of fixture or this level of intensity light.
So when we get to our meeting, we can say, this is what.
Side
Right.
and everything in here.
Guessing game. the
Well, that's in
guesswork.
streetscape, which we haven't gotten to yet. Yes,
that's
So
what
it takes the guesswork out of it.
takes a lot of guesswork out of it, yes.
Now, and I'm just asking, a lot of times we've had applicants come to us and, we've asked for things that are like, oh, I can't really afford this, I'm trying to get off the ground, we've always kind of been flexible with them. But by having all of this in here, they're required to do it, is what it is.
Right. And they can request the deviations, which would be the waivers. I mean, that's obviously built in here, because we want that flexibility. You don't want everything to be cookie cutter. So that, having that ability, that flexibility, so to speak, I think will provide for more interest in some of the buildings and architecture. We can always come back to these sections. The next one is the waterfront overlay standards.
I mean, we have some of this code already, right?
Right, access to the waterfront.
Some new things talked about here are sea level rise, but I think the waterfront now also recognizes the waterfront as a frontage and the street front as a frontage. So that was something that we didn't have in the old code that created an issue, because you want the waterfront to be attractive to that community, the boating community as well. So that's changed a little. Public access is still very much at the height of this.
Question,
Maybe,
just, you design standards, I saw something in red, which I assume you had added, under general garden walls and fences,
what page are you on?
4.32.
Okay. Yeah. Okay,
Is this in line with if you have a house on a corner? Along the street's only 4 feet and the front's only 4 feet, but what about the backyard? Can they do 8 feet?
yes, if you have a front, you've got,
Let's say you have a house on a corner, you got the front of the house, which
you
can
got
only be
two
4 feet.
fronts,
This can be 4 feet
right,
along the street. What about when you get in the backyard? You're still along the back of the street. Can they do 8 feet back here and on the side?
yes.
It's 8 or 6, I thought it was 6.
So now it's maximum, rear property lines, maximum of 8,
So it's going
It's
from
the red
6 to
section.
8.
right?
So do you understand what I'm saying? Like, let's say you drive down the street, you see the side of the house, typically it's always 4 feet. But when you get towards the
If it's,
rear of
if
the
it's not,
house,
if corner lots would have two fronts, right? Or no,
I don't, under
That's
this, I
changing, so
don't
it's a
know.
front and a side, I believe now.
It's a front and a side, but I'm just reading, it says all walls and fences not along the property lines at the public streets, including walls, fences, mid-block, and rear property line shall be maximum 8. Does that mean that they can still put an 8-foot fence to surround their backyard? So that when people are driving down the street, they can't look in the backyard and see somebody?
I believe so. You mean having, if you set back your fence, you box in your backyard? behind your
Yes.
Setback,
Like,
you would be able to have an 8 foot. in
most
your-
people that live on a corner, they put 4 feet in the front, they
Mhm.
put 4 feet down the side, but when they start to get to the
Right.
back of the house, they like an 8-foot, so if they. put
Yes, that
4
would be allowed,
Yeah,
right.
So the
It's not
8-foot
on
would still-
public, it says not along property lines at public street right of ways.
But is the public street right away the whole depth of the house that's on the corner? I'm not understanding. Let's say this is a corner lot, and the house is in the middle. Let's say this is the house. If they want to box in their backyard back here, can they put an 8-foot fence along the street here
I see
to
what you
box
see,
in
but
their
then
yard?
that's the street on
This
one
is the
end,
house, so you got a front street, which is 4.
and a
Normally it's 4 down here because they want cars to be able to see at the intersection, but toward the
I
back of
see
the
what you're
house,
saying,
can they
no,
do
that,
8
that
feet?
would not be allowed the 8 feet, because that's along a public right of
see,
way.
a lot of people want,
Okay,
the
well,
rear-
that would be a waiver request,
that's
like
something.
it would be now, you wouldn't be able to do that now.
A lot of houses around here that have that.
Hmm.
but A lot of houses, I think the current code said if you were behind the front face of the house, then you can do it.
Not along the street. It's a street, right now it's a front yard. So,
I don't know, I just see a lot of them around Kingston that people have 8 feet in the backyard because they want their privacy.
Yeah, you
Let me
could
tell you.
either,
Sue, I have to head out, but just one thing for everyone to consider, while you're looking at this, if there's something that you don't agree with as it's written, start thinking about what the alternative is, because the whole point of this is for you guys to eventually get recommendations. And you can't just say the recommendations, we don't like, this, and this. We want to kind of think about, what
Can it be as general as like, when we're talking about those
with the single thing.
T3, yeah, so can it be as general as we would like to see more of the current regulations in R or R1 incorporated in? And is
I
that
imagine.
too general? Is it?
well, I think that, yeah, I think you need to be a little bit more specific. You need to, say,
And preclude, and maybe preclude some of the buildings type, the multiplex or the.
I think that would be like a specific recommendation, yes, if you said in the T3, and we don't think that smallplex,
Or the smallplex.
small multiplex belongs, then, and you think that should get removed, then that would be a specific rate. That's, I think, the type of recommendation you should be making, yes.
I'm still not understanding the fence thing. People have 8-foot fences around all the backyards.
well, right now, they shouldn't have 8 foot, 6 foot is the maximum.
Or rather
But-
6 foot. I'm just-
So, but people do a lot of things that aren't necessarily allowed by code,
The problem
and
is,
that doesn't mean that
that
they're,
requirement no longer, they'll need a building permit anymore for a fence. For a building permit. So you put up whatever you want, unless they catch you putting up something bigger.
You no longer need the building permit, but that does not necessarily mean that you could just put up whatever you want. I
I
mean,
just-
if you don't put up something to code, then they can certainly make you take it down.
Yeah.
And
Currently,
that's, I mean,
But it goes back to the building.
it's an
permit.
enforcement.
Last year.
What I read with the red, why did that red appear?
Building permit required.
The red is in, anything you see in red is what has been changed or added since the draft 2. This is the 3rd draft. So
So
what
somebody saw
is in,
fences and decided that it needed to be in there, so
right,
that's
so
what it
that
is.
is a change from the
So,
last draft.
so the rights of way don't necessarily mean stops at the sidewalk. Because the city's right away to go beyond that.
That-
Correct, yeah.
I'm just not,
It's, yeah, you can't put a structure in the right of way,
well,
so
that
it
would
would be
know,
on the property line.
but if you went down the property line, if you're on a street, you're saying it can only be 4 feet.
Correct, yeah, this is,
So if somebody's on a
says-
corner, they can't have a
Well-
privacy fence for the backyard.
I don't have my existing zoning code with me, but does it say that it's one side is deemed front yard and the rest are deemed rear.
No,
Yes.
both are fronts right now, both are
Two.
But
fronts.
there is a spot where you can go up to the 6 or 8 feet right now.
If you're on a side yard.
Yeah.
And that's at
And
the
that's what you're
center.
talking about, right?
Now
No,
he's talking about a corner.
that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about when you have,
No, I know about having 2 front
okay,
yards.
you have a house like this, here's A street, here's B street, and the house is sitting here, okay? The property goes like this, that you would have a 4 foot along this and 4 foot here, but this is basically the person's backyard.
Yes.
So 8, he's talking about putting 8, like in this area here.
And here too, huh?
Well, yeah,
Anywhere,
but
even
this
behind
is,
the
this
house.
is the area, because this is the street over
So
here.
they're saying you can't do it.
So right now, the way this is reading is
Well,
along the
because it would
street.
have to be like over here somewhere.
No,
No, she's saying if you visually look into the yard, you cannot see anything but 4 feet.
so the,
I
it
didn't-
would be,
Okay. I didn't get that part.
yeah, it would be a waiver. Which, you know, I don't, you know, I don't know that it would be such a,
Hard to get.
yeah.
I mean, just most people want to have their backyard fenced in. Reasonable thing. They want people to buy it.
Sure, yeah.
And I think most people that have backyards are fenced in now.
Okay. Parking?
Parking,
More on that.
So is parking going to be allowed as the principal use of a property? Is that going to be allowed?
I have to look at tables.
I know,
In
probably jumping
some
around.
districts, it might be.
Which I think is a good idea.
Many.
So if you don't need a building permit for a fence, they'd have to just apply for a waiver through the minor board. Does that mean the process?
You know,
To go
I went down there, following specifically on the fence. And then you told me you don't need another building permit. So you do it, that's,
Save yourself 50 bucks if I had to pay for my.
you did? I did originally,
Yeah, you used to have to get,
yeah, you said,
that's changed.
So surface parking lots are allowed by special permit. In
Yeah, with,
almost all, on the use table
Parking
on
stands are 4.27.
3.7. Swing back to,
there we go.
the only places they would not be allowed would be the waterfront district.
standalone lots, you mean? That's the
Right,
principal
so
use?
just- So if you look at the use tables on page 3.6 and 3.7, those are some good reference, yeah, now, those are last week's batch. 3.6 and 3.7 pages are your use tables, permitted use. tables. So what Kyla was referring to is
I'm gonna pull up another email from.
Surface parking is allowed.
As primary use, okay.
Yes.
So a lot of them are special permit.
So 3.7, you see civic.
But I think that being said, the parking layout standards would restrict how the parking lots are laid out.
Right,
Like setbacks for parking, landscaping. So whether or not you would.
Are there gonna be design standards for those parking?
well,
lots?
that's the section we want to look at, the parking section right now. And that's in this 4.
Okay.
So you see them, Rob? On 3.7?
Yeah, I see 3.7.
So surface parking as primary use is allowed by special permit in all of those zones.
Which means somebody can take an empty lot and make it a parking lot? Is that what that is?
With special,
By special permit, yes.
Now,
And there are the design standards, obviously.
And the design standards will,
Well,
space,
in the
size.
section 4 that we gave you tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got parking, which starts on 4.37.
Yeah.
Okay? So this speaks to when parking goes through applicability. One thing we spoke about earlier today with Bartek is that the "and" at the end of number 2 is going to be struck. So this first table is your parking requirements.
Is there anything in here that prevents people from paving over their front lawn or back lawn?
For parking,
Yeah.
you have parking location and access on page 4.39 that speaks to parking setbacks and location. Parking is generally encouraged in rear yards. They don't want it in front yards.
And have they
Think
defined front
in-
yards as like the corner of the building to the street?
Like in your section reviews where it speaks to like your T4s where you go in there, it says parking to the side or the rear, parking in rear.
Yeah, if I brought up the
So you have to refer to your transect
only admin
sections up above and
No, I know
down.
that.
That's long.
I know.
In T3, parking to the side or rear. In T3N and T3NL. And T3.
So that was your question.
Huh? Yeah, so that's,
There's someone only admin things over there.
Front lawn.
yep, I know.
Is what it is.
I argue the fact that it should be,
So you might not have this section this time because this was from last time, but so this is the T3. And each district has parking placement section. And that talks about the locations of parking. But now that I say that, oh, driveways are permitted forward of the parking setback line, parking access. Right, because I asked Bartek that, right? So those are not the setbacks for driveways, those are the setbacks for parking lots. Or,
right, but in, what page are you on? 3.16, go to 316 for your T3. Okay, there. Okay, so your T3, and it, right there, you're
right,
you're looking
side or
for
rear.
parking inside or rear.
Which most of the houses can't because they don't have the width on their lots to get around the house. I'm telling you, most of the houses in my neighborhood, they're lucky they got 5 or 10 feet on the side of it. Because they've been built as a house with a garage. So most people under this code are gonna take the garage and convert it into living space. That's gonna be your accessory dwelling unit. And then you're gonna have to go parking in the front, so you're gonna take a single car driveway and make it a 2-car driveway. Means you're losing front space. That house is an exact, see that blue car? That goes to the house to the right.
So would you like to see restriction on parking in the front yard, or would you like to allow parking in the front?
No, I would like to see restrictions in the front yard. I'm also afraid they're gonna take these single driveways and widen. Let's say under that front, as you look at the front door, the
Yes.
window to the right, they could put another strip of pavement in and make that a 2-car driveway. And say, well, we still have a front lawn, but it's just narrower. Understand what I'm saying?
So I understand what you're saying. So right now, there's no parking in a front yard. So the front yard setback, I mean, you still have you have your driveway there.
Well, that driveway is
People are
right
gonna
up to
park
the-
in their driveway.
Correct.
And,
But you can't go to the right of that driveway because you don't have enough room with the setback, but they can certainly pave to the left of that driveway.
Part of the driveway is considered in the front yard too.
well, yeah, I
But
mean, you
we're-
have to,
No, but I mean, when I was in building safety, we used to say that the corner of the building is defined with the front yard.
no, the front yard is the front where your front yard setback is.
So that's going to be defined.
Yeah, so if your front yard setback is 10 feet, then from your property line 10 feet back, you can't park there. Technically.
Sorry, I'm a visual person. Can you draw that? Not understanding.
What's that?
So if you have, this is the street.
Yeah.
Okay, and you have your house here,
Yeah, I drive it to the right.
and this is the street, this is the sidewalk. And then this is your property line here.
Correct.
Okay, your front yard setback technically, say it's 10 feet.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's where your house sits. This is your required front yard setback. Your driveway comes in like this. Theoretically, this is a no parking area, even though your driveway is crossing there. You're not supposed to park there the way the code is now. You can park back here, sorry,
And that's what I
here.
was just referring to.
But if your house sits back here, in front of your house is here, your setback is still 10 feet. This is still a parking area, a legal parking area. You just can't park in this front yard setback.
Yeah, like here, your front yard setback could be like right here, right?
So you can't park in your driveway down?
You can't park technically from that setback out to here.
It's not considered a legal parking space, no.
That's what.
People do it all the time. I mean,
Anyway,
it's,
how's some houses
it's
are back,
judged.
and right up to the street,
You know,
right?
you're gonna park in tandem.
Yeah, no, I know.
If you ever.
But I'm
fail.
just saying, that, like, if you convert that garage to an accessory dwelling unit, there's no parking requirement, right?
Correct.
But if somebody can't decide that they want to widen that driveway, can they?
According to this, they could widen it to 20 feet.
20 feet is the
So-
maximum
So
length.
in that
Maximum
case,
curb
they could put another strip in front of their house.
They can have, they're allowed one curb cut, max width of 20 feet.
So if that driveway's 10 feet, they can put another driveway 10 feet in front of the house and pave over the front lawn.
They can't put a second driveway. They can
No,
put,
they
they
can
can
widen that
widen it. Correct.
Well, the 20 feet could be,
It's a curb cut, 20
Whichever
foot
way,
max
But the
curb.
practicality is that driveway, I know, is on the property line, so they're gonna pave to the left in front of the
but
front
you're
door.
still governed by the front yard setback.
Right, so you wouldn't be able to park in that front yard. You would have to.
Right.
You could widen it to 20 feet, but you would have to be behind. The minimum setback for off-street parking from all property lines are provided in the Transect standards. So then
So in this case, if you couldn't park in the front, then technically you're not supposed to be paving.
You can pave it, but you just can't park there.
Well, then that goes back to enforcement. Who's gonna fight it?
There's bigger fish to fry than.
This is the problem with adding more.
Who's gonna come around and enforce it?
Nobody.
Right.
So you're gonna have your yards paved over.
And I got a problem with people just parking.
Because you're adding more housing and people need places
For
to
cars.
because they don't wanna move their cars in the winter time with snow. This is what's gonna happen over the next 10 years.
Okay, so parking.
So, so the requirements in the table give you the minimum, which in a lot of cases is no minimum, and they also give you a maximum.
Right.
So if you're looking at residential uses, there's a no minimum and a maximum of 2 per dwelling. Lodging, no minimum, maximum of
2 or 3, right, and if,
Right.
Again, if you're gonna exceed that, I don't know. I mean, many single families have more than 2 cars.
Some have 4.
On the street,
I understand that.
right?
And if you're creating, now this is giving you a maximum of 2 per dwelling. So if you're creating if you're building new, then 2 is what you're allowed maximum. 3 in your T3Ns. Thanks, Robert.
But that's only to park on the driveway, that isn't included in the parking.
Okay, maximum parking requirements are intended to limit parking facility size, which impacts walkability and impervious ground cover. It shall be applied to parking lots and parking structures. Residential uses with 3 or less units are exempt. So that's not going to apply to a normal one-family home in an R.
So you take that-
T3.
So that house, if you have a mom and a dad, and you have a teenage kid, and they have accessory dwelling unit with grandma in it, they could have 4 cars.
Correct,
And so that driveway only allows 1 car, even if they paved over in the front, they're not supposed to be there, so that means there's 3 cars on the street. And that street isn't even wide enough to park 3 cars in front of their house, so they can be in front of the guy next door, provided he doesn't have a lot of cars.
or they park in tandem. One behind the other in
Well,
the
you can't, they'd
driveway.
be in the setback,
Huh?
they'd be in the setback.
Well, you probably could get 2 in there legally if you do looking behind the black car there.
Yeah, I mean, no one's gonna come around and ticket you for parking in your driveway, but
Yeah.
they're just saying you can't create parking in that
Right.
setback. I mean,
I understand.
if somebody parks there.
Yeah, if you park it, yeah. Okay, otherwise exceptions to the maximum limits are major waivers. So for multifamily residential projects, if they wanted to exceed the maximum number per unit, they'd have to ask the planning board for a waiver. In most cases, they're not going to be looking to exceed, they'll be looking to meet the minimum.
The only place you might see that is commercial, like, you know, we have things where like, pharmacy, CVS and that, they want a certain amount of parking.
Right.
You know, you might see those as major waivers.
So right now, our code says there isn't.
Correct. That's one of the major differences. I do want to look at the parking demand strategy, which is on the next page, 4.38. This is something that is new because of the parking and the way the requirements are structured. We pushed for something like this to be incorporated into the code. We first saw it in Buffalo's code. I have talked to Bartek about the name. I don't like reduction in the name. I like parking demand strategy because that's exactly what it is. And the limits that this requires a project sponsor to actually look at their anticipated needs for parking and do some, basically justification as to the number of spaces that they're providing. I think the thresholds that are incorporated in this, it's required when you have a single building footprint, the way it's written right now, a footprint of 10,000 square feet or greater, and or a total gross floor area that exceeds 50,000. I think those numbers are too high for Kingston. I was thinking in the range of a footprint of 7,500 and then a gross floor area exceeding 10,000. Those were my thoughts. I don't know what the board members feel. we also spoke with Bartek earlier today about the first paragraph, the first A reads a description of how the anticipated parking demand will be met. And the first section really needs to be how they, what is your anticipated parking demand and how do you arrive at that number? So, I mean, first of all, we need them to say, this is what we anticipate. So that has to be your first step. Then how you deal with that is your next step. So that's a section that I think needs to be added in. Those are probably my main issues. I think in B, right now, the way B reads, I said it's a description of the strategies that will be employed to reduce. I think to demonstrate is the correct wording there. I also think that in the examples that they cite here, these are not, all inclusive. I think that's important to recognize. But it talks about free subsidized transit passes and basically public transportation. I think it should also speak to the availability of those services because they aren't 24/7. Sometimes they don't operate on certain days of the week. So I think that that's important to recognize too, is their availability. Not just that they exist, but what is their availability? And how does that, play into what your occupancies are going to be? I mean, if you're a commercial building and you are operating Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, then transit services are likely available for you. But if you're a multifamily residential complex that looks to public transit to be available for your tenants, then we don't have that in the city. So that's, I think, why availability is important to talk to there. I don't know if the board has any thoughts, comments, but those were kind of mine on that. Going forward, they speak to minimum dimensional requirements. I do want to let you take a look at this. It introduces 30-degree parking, which we don't presently have a requirement. We don't have anything.
On the street?
Yeah, no, these are in parking lots.
Okay.
Okay, street standards are discussed separately,
Okay.
but in parking, this is in parking lots, so we have 30-degree being introduced and tandem is being introduced. And we do have some places in Kingston that we do have tandem parking being used in office buildings. The other ones, 45, 60-degree perpendicular and parallel, we do have in our codes. Some of the dimensions are different. What I did was I would recommend that these be diagrammed, not just in a table format, but diagrams be provided to show these dimensions in a visual way, not just in a tabular way. I think that's important. Some of them have been reduced. For example, the aisle width for the perpendicular is gone down from 24 feet to 20, or it's up actually, I'm sorry. We have 22 feet required. This is up to 20, this requires 24 for two-way and one way. So that's an improvement because 22 is kind of tough. Some have been reduced, some have been increased. The parking space width has gone down in both parallel and perpendicular from 9 to 8. So that's something to consider. 8-foot aisle, 8-foot parking space is tight, particularly if you're getting in and out, depending on your vehicle. Be nice if everybody parked right in their parking space dead center, but that doesn't always happen.
No, especially when you have people that have SUVs.
Yeah, so the 8-foot might be a little tight for. So, take a look at those. the landscaping required, let me look at the location and access requirements, they were good. Parking lot landscaping standards, they're a little bit different than what we have right now.
I mean, you have a small mom and pop coming in that is, you know, doing a small project. I mean, we're not gonna require them to get a landscape planner to figure this 10% on. I mean, are they gonna still work with staff a little bit, or how cost? Just, you know,
Well,
sometimes
I
people
mean,
come in, they don't give us a lot,
they-
and I'm just,
if they're-
what level are we now raising everybody to?
You're talking, I mean, most mom and pops are gonna be, you know, on the street, looking, you know, on main streets or relying on the current public parking, I think. Already, I don't think that they're gonna be looking to provide off-street parking for the majority of that type of,
Right, and I think there are some provisions for existing,
yeah.
you know, whether or not they would have to bring full compliance.
Well, that's what we have a lot of people that come in that are redeveloping properties that are already there. We say, well, you know, show us the parking, show us the handicap, I mean, how,
I think that's,
I mean, are they gonna now be required all new sidewalks, all new landscape plan, 10%, all the new spaces with all the new sizes? Is this
Good
like across
question,
the board?
because technically, yeah, if they're redeveloping the property, yeah.
That's what I'm just,
New, I mean, if you look at that first section, applicability. New development, changes in land use, changes in the intensity of the building or structure that cause an increase or decrease of 25% or greater gross floor area. So that's where, that's your parameters right there.
so you're gonna have a lot of people that are gonna have to,
Well, your intensity,
A lot more
I think
than
if you're like looking at a store that's changing hands, I think you look at that last one, the change in the intensity of the building or the structure that causes an increase or decrease of 25% or greater.
right, so if you're
I-
reusing an existing, like,
Yeah.
say the people.
Right now, it's any change in intensity. There's no threshold. And now this establishes a 25% threshold, which
now,
is
is
a
it
little different.
25% of the complex or 25% of that particular building? We have a few, like, I'm just saying, we have a few companies.
25% of the greater gross floor area
So
or
you,
dwelling
so let's say, like, we remember we had like Colony Liquor, they were doing one building, but they had multiple buildings. So we just looking at the one building, or we looking at, well, no, that one building is only a small percentage of the whole?
I think if you're looking at Colony Liquor,
I'm just-
you're looking at the complex. I mean,
That's-
you're looking at the gross floor. I mean, it's all a business. It's one business.
That's what I'm just
You have to
asking.
Look at it like that.
Okay. And then in that case, if they were to do renovations, then we start looking at the whole parking lots, all the spaces, sidewalks, landscaping through the whole project. Just
Yeah.
so I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to look at that, but yeah.
Very expensive for people to do some stuff moving forward.
I also see that you reached out to the consultants of some other communities around with parking requirements. I see Saratoga Springs did not remove minimum parking requirements from their
Right,
zoning overall.
Right.
Have your drive
Tyler-
park there?
I try, yeah, I walk there a lot, yeah. But what are your thoughts on that?
I have not had a chance to
I'm
look at
just
those
looking at
other
those-
cities yet. I know Kyle sent them around.
right, those specific ones were, because we reached out to the consultant.
Right.
I asked them to look at specifically places that have form-based code citywide, places that have eliminated single-family districts,
But this one
and have
has,
eliminated parking
shows
standards.
residences as a minimum of 2 per unit,
Right, some of them, I can't remember,
or 1.5 per in the whatever districts, the other districts they have here.
So So you have a code that says you can do accessory dwellings through the whole town, but from a practical standpoint, you can't meet the parking, you can't do it.
Right, some of them specify that they eliminated single family, but only by allowing accessory dwelling units. And then others talk about I think one said it reduced parking, but still required one per dwelling unit. Is that Saratoga? Or
I
is
don't
that,
think this is Saratoga.
that's,
I haven't had a chance to read
I
through.
thought you're on Saratoga.
I am, but I don't
oh, I
trust
thought you
it,
meant
but
the
she's
email,
talking
I
about.
thought you meant the email that I sent. Uh,
That's what, you're looking at the email she sent? It's like 4 or 5 different places.
Yeah, there's different states.
Connecticut, this one. Thank you.
All right,
So,
well, she's looking that up. Is there any other questions in that parking section? Any other thoughts, concerns, comments?
so Saratoga removed, they adopted a citywide form-based code. They allow more than one dwelling in all residential districts because they allow ADUs by right in all residential districts. And they did not remove their minimum parking requirements. The one that I was talking about, Summerfield, Massachusetts, it said they adopted citywide code. They eliminated single-family districts, but they kept a one space per dwelling unit. It says with context-based parking requirements. I didn't look and see what that actually means, but that's just the summary.
So we can, under the new code, we can have a separate parking lot as long as it meets the setbacks and landscaping requirements. So
Mhm.
somebody could in a residential area, build their 3, 4, 5 family. They could pick a house next door, tear it down to a parking lot.
Yes, with a special use permit. Yes.
But the fact that Saratoga has allowed ADUs by right in all residential districts, there's still some oversight as to minimum parking requirements for those things too, right? Is that what you're saying?
I assume so. I didn't look specifically to see what their parking requirements are, but they did not remove the minimum parking requirements. So there's some parking requirement presumably for residential and commercial, but I don't know. I didn't look at that.
All right, thank you.
So maybe it's worth then going and looking at the Saratoga code.
I saw the email come out, I just didn't have a chance.
Huh?
I saw the email come out, but I didn't have a chance.
Yeah, I mean, the four that they came up with were South Bend, Indiana, Hartford, Connecticut, Somerville, Massachusetts, or Summerfield, Massachusetts, and Saratoga Springs as examples.
Vince, did you have a chance to look at any of those codes? Or Sage, did you guys have a chance to look at any of the codes?
I didn't set it apart, I just skipped it.
Okay.
That email only came out, what?
Right, yeah, I think that was today, and I
Yeah, I
also
got
sent
that.
a link to, that map that there's a map that shows, places that have either eliminated parking requirements in some areas or all areas. So there are a number of cities that are removing them only in commercial districts, and there are some like Buffalo and others that are removing them citywide. But there's a map and you can click on the different ones and see.
I mean, that's just something that, again, the council has to decide if they are taking this code in a direction where they don't want any parking requirements, then they're gonna have to come up with parking for people in snow emergencies and other events.
Mhm.
We which we've been saying for years. in
But
certain
again,
neighborhoods.
I hate to keep going back to what Matt said. If that's something that you feel, okay, so you can make that part of your recommendation.
Yeah.
So that, if the code moves forward with, and is adopted without minimum parking requirements, then the council should provide a plan for how that parking in emergencies, snow emergencies is going to be. I mean, those are the kinds of things you have to start structuring the wording, and getting, putting these thoughts down, because that's gonna be part of your recommendation as the board. And once we get all of the, components in place at hopefully our last workshop, then everybody, we'll go through them. We may have to take points one at a time, because it may not be a total consensus of the board on all of the aspects. We may have to talk about them each individually and go through them that way. I don't know. It's yet to be seen. But these comments, these recommendations have to start being crafted and written.
I understand where you're coming from. I think as a board, though, we're trying to understand the lines of information and how it all works. So then we can understand what recommendations or what we like or what we don't like.
Well, I think that the ADUs is gonna be something that's gonna just,
Well, do we want to talk about ADUs then next, because that's in this section too?
I mean, I personally think that that's gonna just happen. In all residential districts, it's gonna be taken out of the hands of the planning board. It'll be allowed if it meets minimum, New York State building code. But if we're gonna have any say in it, I think that the parking is something that, we can hang our hat on. Not that we're trying to prevent these things from happening, but if they're gonna happen, that we should,
There is no parking crunch.
what's that?
There is no parking requirement for ADUs.
No, there is not,
Yeah,
right? The
so-
way it's written right now,
That's
no,
his
there
point.
is no parking requirement for an ADU.
So, so we avoid having parking all over the place, and we should look at, that's my feeling, we should look at setting a minimum requirement for those as well, as far as parking goes. So,
I'm just concerned about ADUs in all the neighborhoods. I'm concerned about the size, I'm concerned about the parking.
I am
And
too.
I'm also
Okay,
concerned
well,
about
do
the
you want to
character.
look at the language, the way it's written in here? It's on page 4.48.
So you're just more familiar with this now. Is there like, I see the 50% rules, but is there like a requirement of, based on the land itself, like how much is being used? Let's say I have a single family house and I decide to
Like
put
the lot,
a
walking
tiny home
areas.
behind it at 50% of my house. How much of the land?
Yeah, yes, there are lot coverage limits.
Yeah.
And if you're adding
Where are they?
so let me pull up. Is lot coverage.
It's in the individual sections.
So I can pull up an example, but if you're looking at you might not have that.
It's in the front
section.
section.
If you're looking at T3, let's just say,
Let me, yeah.
the lot coverage maximum is 50%. So so you might not, if you don't have your sections from last time. Actually, they might be in there.
What page? I didn't get page.
Page number is, T3 is 3,
3.16 it starts.
yeah, so 3.17 says lot coverage.
Right.
Yes.
3.17.
17. Here,
3.1, 3.2.
that's from last month, right, or last week, example.
Oh, actually, I have it here, I can share
Sorry, 3.1, I got it.
3.17 page, that's the page number you're looking for.
Six.
Okay, she's got it up on the screen.
it. Yeah, so each lot layout has a maximum lot coverage. On the bottom. And lot coverage also includes parking and.
Right, and that's important to know. The lot
Yes.
coverage includes all impermeable
Like
surfaces,
the footprint
so,
of the driveway would be.
yes, that's included in your lot coverage.
So with
Yeah,
walkways.
your walkway, sidewalks, walkways, gazebo, if you had it, a patio, pool, that's included in lot coverage.
Sorry, this is what I'm looking at, right?
Yep,
Where's the lot?
right, 50% right here, your lot.
So this is the section that also talks about maximum width and depth. So if you wanted to combine lots, you would not be able to combine them to be greater than 100 by 180 in this section. So if you
Right.
wanted to buy your neighboring lot and add it into your lot, you wouldn't be able to
Exceed those.
exceed those, yeah.
Is 50% a lot?
50% of the lot.
I mean, like 50%.
I mean, when you throw in like all of your driveway, your garage, right now, it's just your building structures. The way it doesn't include all of that added stuff. Now, that, including all of that, I think that's gonna be, I mean, that's leaving 50% of your property in a green state. Yeah, that's good.
It's a good number.
Yeah, I think so.
What about 50% of your house? Because somebody's got a 2,000 square foot house, they put 1,000 square foot.
But I think we've had regulations for that right now, that you can't exceed a certain percentage of the square footage.
Well, the ADU, the way it's written, the maximum size, okay,
As it's written right now,
Shall be
No, no,
less than
in this
50% of the
code.
square foot of the primary
is
unit.
1,000 square feet. But shall be less than 50% of the square footage,
of the primary unit,
yes.
okay? So you have a house and say a garage, okay? It would be 50% of the house, say you have a 3,000 square foot house,
50%
Gross
is
floor.
1,500 square feet.
50% would, but
It can only
you
be 1,000.
can't make it, you can only do the 1,000.
And then, let's say you're doing the accessory dwelling in the garage, they don't count the garage on the first floor, it's just the second floor, right, where the ADU is going?
Right, the ADU
The
itself
ADU,
can only
The
be.
ADU itself would be the second floor of the garage.
Now we pull your
well,
floor.
it could be the first, I mean, you can
It's
convert
wherever
your
you're
garage
building.
into an ADU,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, does it count 50% of the existing space?
No, the
If the-
primary,
Oh, but I-
primary unit is
Does
what
it
square
count
footage
50%
is
of your lawn, of your backyard? If the structure's already existing, like if your garage already exists.
You want to do the second floor.
And you wanna do the second floor of, you wanna do the, part of your garage as an ADU. And your garage already exists.
You don't have to tear it down to make, is that what you mean?
Well, no,
Right,
let's-
like,
Let's say I took the first floor of the garage where I park my
like say
car,
you have a
second
tiny
floor is
little,
2,000
say I
square
have a
feet.
tiny little backyard, but I have a big garage. and I wanna stick an apartment in my garage.
It could be 2,000 square feet in the existing garage that I already
You
have.
can
Can I
only-
put an apartment in my garage, but I just have a little
1,000
tiny
square
backyard?
feet.
Yes.
No, what I'm saying, but the existing garage could be larger than that, so the actual unit itself can only be 1,000 square feet.
Correct, yes.
So you theoretically can't use your entire garage that you would have pre-existing because,
Well, now that I'm rereading this, the maximum size of an attached ADU.
And then it says the maximum size of the detached ADU is 1,000.
Okay, so that the detached max is 1,000, but not necessarily 50%.
The
The
detached,
50% only comes in with the
Yeah.
attached. So you could have, if you have a detached large garage.
Cause I'm just confused, if my garage already takes up 90% of my backyard, but it was already there when I bought my house.
Yeah,
But it takes up like 90% of my backyard. That takes up more than 50%, you know what I mean? It takes up, it takes up more
Lot
than half my
coverage, we're
land.
talking lot coverage.
Yeah.
Okay, is different than the 50% is the square
Right.
footage of your floor space.
Yes, but it takes up more than half my lot coverage. My garage takes up more
Your
than
lot
half my lot
coverage is,
coverage.
if it's existing, it's existing.
so the lot
Yeah,
coverage doesn't
nobody's gonna
apply if
expect
it's
it.
existing.
It's the lot coverage
Yeah.
doesn't apply if it's existing,
yeah, I don't think anyone's going to tell you to tear
Yeah.
down your garage and build a small.
but you can still put
But
an
can somebody
apartment in
say,
it.
well, that garage is too big, you can't put an ADU?
That's
You
what
don't-
I'm
you don't
saying,
meet the
can
lot
someone
coverage?
tell you, no,
I don't think
your
so.
garage is too
No.
big, you can't
I
put
don't
it
wouldn't
in
think
say
so.
so
dwelling.
either.
No, I
Your
don't
your
think
maximum
that
is
would
1,000 square feet for
Can-
your,
can a detached ADU has to be, cannot exceed 50% of the primer, is that just for attached?
seems
That's
like
what Kyla
that's
says,
just
the
for
way she's reading it's
attached.
just for attached.
But detached is 1,000 square feet.
But
anyway.
detached is 1,000 square foot minimum.
And you can only have
Or
one
max.
ADU per property.
One ADU, you can have second ADU by special use permit.
Right, by planning board. It's either major waiver or special. use.
Right.
That doesn't-
Major
that
waiver.
So if I had my giant garage, I could stick 2 apartments in it if I got a major waiver
No, you could have, I believe you can have one in your dwelling unit and one
in your garage.
Right, you can't have
attached.
two
One
in-
attached and one detached, I mean.
Gotcha, okay.
Now, is there any design standard to prevent people from just taking garages and converting them? Like you're gonna go down the street, you see a 2-car garage and they just board up the 2 doors and they put a window. in
Yeah,
the wall.
that's what this thing looks like, I think, there's this carriage house right here, right? That's like what this is? Isn't that what this thing, or is
Yeah, that would
that?
be the design type of structure.
But that shows garage doors, so what happens if somebody comes in and says, I'm taking my doors out? Because that is a concern of mine with ADUs, is as you go down the neighborhood, you see house, garage, house, garage, house, garage, and you're like, oh, that got converted, oh, that, because it's blatantly obvious that the brick garage, like I have a 2-car brick garage, if I boarded up where the doors are, you would clearly see that I enclosed it.
Carriage house.
4.15.
I think that they're gonna be governed by like light and ventilation requirements
No, but
and energy code, yeah, I know.
I'm looking at aesthetics.
I don't know about that, aesthetics.
There might be something in the architectural, I have to look at that.
Do you want, I want to do it
understand
now,
what
but
you
you
mean.
understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and Bartek did say, to take a list of any questions that we have, which we don't know the answers to.
Should this all?
I mean, if an ADU fits in the neighborhood and fits with the house and is architecturally designed well, I don't mind it. I just don't want to see people cob houses together to make these extra units with
Right.
garages. You have everybody taking this 2 detached garage, laying a sewer pipe back into their house, water, and they got an apartment.
Like some places sticking at 22.
Should it say in here that a second ADU is allowed by special permit? So we can say it here? Doesn't.
It says that
Says
in the,
If it does, that's fine.
It's not in this, but it's in the code, yeah.
So no parking requirements are enforced or in place right now for an ADU right now.
No, ADUs right now
Oh, you said-
do require parking.
No, number 10 says it, no parking.
Not in heat, not in this one,
Oh, I
in the
thought-
current
I
code.
thought you meant it.
Oh.
Okay, so there are parking requirements.
In the current code, there are, yes.
Again, that goes back to neighborhoods, when we sit at a planning board and all the neighbors come in, they're complaining about a unit going in. Because they're like, I got no place to park and everyone's in front of my house.
Yeah.
There's certain neighborhoods that sometimes have one-sided parking.
I mean, I think we should still attach parking requirements
I agree.
to that, ADUs and to the neighborhood,
I mean, my feeling is you can't park a car and you shouldn't have it.
Okay.
So,
All right, so well, if you want to think about what kind of requirements you would want to see.
where we're going back to table 405.16C1 here, right? That's the.
Well, yeah, I mean,
All of the minimums have been removed
right,
yes, so
for
you
residential,
for residential.
right, well, and
Well,
lodging.
yeah, so.
So, yeah, so you would want to think about, is it important to you for just residential uses or commercial uses or a combination in different areas?
I mean, the lodging is, that's not bed and breakfast, right? It's lodge,
That is,
does that
is,
fall under lodging, the bed and
I
breakfast?
believe that includes short-term rentals.
Yep.
Bed and
Okay, so that's
breakfast
not considered, okay.
and hotels.
ADUs would be under residential uses.
Now, can you do it Airbnb for an ADU?
No,
Under the current draft, you can. My understanding is that you would, under the current draft, which we will get there, you would be permitted one ADU per lot,
correct.
whether it's a room rental or a full unit. But the intention is to limit the number of full unit short-term rentals citywide. So you could have, if you have a duplex or a fourplex or an ADU, you would be permitted one short-term rental per lot. But
So in
the
other words, you
total
couldn't have,
citywide
like,
restriction would be a
If you have an
10%.
ADU, you can use it as a short-term rental.
So an
Right, there
ADU,
is a registration requirement,
but
but you can't have like an ADU and a short-term rental.
correct.
That's
Gotcha.
what you're saying.
But basically an ADU, it's not like it has to be family member or anything like, an ADU is just freely rentable to long-term tenant, short-term tenant, Airbnb, whatever, whoever you want to rent to, you can rent to.
Well, if you're doing short-term rental, there are requirements for registration, things like that. So there's a little bit different process there. So they do have some kind of oversight on them. And like Kyla said, there's 3 types of short-term rentals now. One is the full unit, okay? Another is if you want to do a room in your house. And the other is like if you go like a snowbird or something, you want to rent your house out for 30 days. I think it's a maximum, right? 30,
I think something like that.
yeah, 30 days, fewer than 30 days per year.
All right, so for the residential uses, we're just focusing on the T3s, now, is that where you're?
What are you focusing on?
I'm focusing on T3s.
I'll focus on that as well.
I want to have a minimum.
Okay,
I'm still liking 2. Or 2 minimum, 3 maximum,
I'm sorry, this is
2 minimum.
2 minimum. Because you gotta remember, you're traditionally have a house, it's gonna have 2 cars. And then you're gonna have an ADU that's probably gonna have one.
Well, then we got ADU requirements too that are gonna have to be tabulated. That'll be a whole separate section. They would have to be, if you have an ADU, that's another dwelling in mind, right? So, right? You got the primary residence and then you have another dwelling.
Well, I think if you have an ADU, what you have to do is your parking requirements have to take into consideration the primary residence. So if you want to create an ADU, you need so many spots because there's a primary residence and the ADU.
That's what I'm saying.
So what do you think, 3?
Well, I think we should have 2 minimum for the primary maybe and 1
That's where I'm
for
getting at,
the
3.
ADU.
So you're saying, maybe if somebody wants to do an ADU, they have to have 3 spots off street, is what you're
2
saying.
for the primary and 1 for the ADU.
That's 3.
Okay, so we'll put that as a recommendation, unless anybody wants to change that.
In your T3 and your T2s.
T3s, what's
And you're talking about all the T3s.
Yeah,
You're not
and-
looking at
What's
that
your-
for the
what's the
T4
T2
or the
district?
T5.
No, because that's more
Okay,
industrial.
And what is the T2C? What's that?
What's T2?
T2C is conservation.
yeah,
Okay,
So
so
you're
that-
really
Oh,
in
yeah.
there anyways.
Now, it also has 3 per dwelling maximum. That's for the primary.
yeah.
Do we want to keep that?
That's not, residential uses with 3 or less units are exempt from the maximum parking
Okay,
requirements. So I think you have to
Okay.
remember that.
All right.
So I'm gonna say you don't need to
Okay.
mess with that.
What do you think?
I don't know, I think there should be parking. I agree with you. What it should be, I'm not
And we're not the only municipality that would be,
sold on yet.
like Saratoga did not remove minimum parking regulations. We wouldn't be the only municipality to do so.
No, the thing is, if you're gonna add units, which in theory, this code's gonna add units, where are people gonna go? We live in the Northeast, we don't walk, we don't have golf carts, it's cold, people have cars. They need to go someplace in bad weather.
Okay, let's move on. Does that sound okay to you? I think it's gonna be passed by the full board anyway, so.
Yeah, well,
You know, we're just-
obviously we'll be circling back and we're gonna go through everything again and, we'll be looking at things.
And I'm all for ADUs, I just don't.
Can we move to short-term rentals? Unless there's anything more with the ADUs, it seemed to me like the parking was.
But we're gonna ask Bartek if there's,
Design
design standards on it.
Yes, I have that as a note, carriage house, removal of garage door design standards.
Okay, but next one.
And I'm just, before we go, if somebody were to put a separate structure in the backyard, it's gonna be a little setback.
A ADU in a separate structure, I believe, would fall under the accessory use
Yeah.
setbacks.
It would be like a garage.
Which would be,
Type
yeah, it would
structure.
be the setbacks for like a garage or something. not
And in
the
these
setbacks.
residential zones, what did they
I
change those?
think T3 is 8 feet, I.
So those are still staying in place?
They may not be the same, I did not do, we should have that.
We don't have to do that now if you want to look at it. My only concern is somebody putting the ADU right neighbor's backyard, like,
Side setback for accessory in the T3 is 5 feet. Rear setback 15.
Yeah,
Oh, rear setback accessory is 5, so you're looking at 5 feet
what is it now, roughly?
6 foot now.
for accessory is
Yep.
6 feet.
Okay. Short-term rentals. Page 4.53.
And Airbnbs are covered with this too, right?
Yes.
I think it's great we're putting, bringing the reins in on this thing. Because twofold. There are, it makes people who are the legitimate, not that Airbnbs are legitimate, but the people have to come before the planning board, with their bed and breakfast or periodic review,
That's the playing field.
That's not, and also, I mean, again, my thing was that, we need to get the associated fees that,
Now it says, short STRF permit shall be limited to 1% of the city's housing units based on the latest.
So that's the full, that's what I was talking about, the full unit.
Right.
So-
How many permits is that?
Well, I asked that today, I asked for those. I was told that approximately right now there are 10,000 units citywide. So it would mean about 100 units could be registered and operating as the STFs.
would that be a lottery
Okay.
system, or they're gonna?
So, but right now, there's, according, I asked, how many do we have already? Because obviously that would be part of that 100, there's about 50 right now.
When you go on Airbnb, there's about 50 now.
Yeah, well, no,
There's
that's
50
registered,
registered with the building
Registered.
department. If you go on Airbnb, there would be
probably
quite
a lot more.
different number.
But these
Yeah, I
are,
mean-
these are the registered ones, and they should all be registered, but
Correct, but I'm just saying,
obviously that's
if we've
something-
got 500 right now,
But I
You could
also
go to
don't
100.
know, we're talking about full unit rentals, so on Airbnb, I don't know if you went on
Right.
Airbnb,
Can't
how
tell.
many of those would be room rental versus full unit.
and it
So,
says it- and I'm sorry, I mean,
Go ahead.
it says a short-term rental shall host no more than 2 guests per bedroom and is limited to a maximum capacity of 6 people. And if you have a big house, 6 people is not a lot.
Yeah, that's interesting, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're registering,
If you're registering
you've
for
got
it, you got 4 or 5
you've
bedroom
got 4
house.
bedrooms, it doesn't matter, you still have a maximum occupancy capacity of 6
So
persons.
like the town of Woodstock has a cap on their short-term rentals,
Yes.
right? Do platforms like Airbnb,
On for that.
VRBO, do they all become part of the enforcement part, or
No,
they would say, "Let's do that"?
no,
So that's,
The only thing they get involved in is really collecting the taxes
Yeah.
because they're mandated by the state, but that's an enforcement mechanism for the towns.
yeah,
To be honest with you, some Airbnbs have more people. If it's not a problem, not hooting and hollering, nobody's complaining, it's fine. If it becomes a problem, then it gives the city,
what
say,
was,
well, this is what our code requires.
some of the methodology?
yeah, I mean, I don't know what enforcement wise,
I'm not
if you-
complaining about it. I just
If you're
know that-
registered, I'm registered and I have an Airbnb and I know my maximum occupancy is 6 and I rent out my house and 15 people show up and my neighbors complain. I don't know what if your registration is pulled, I don't know what
Yeah, I
the
think-
enforcement is.
That would
There-
likely be
There's
that.
no course of action. Airbnb has no liability, there's no.
Yeah.
Well, they don't, but I do, as
There's-
the property owner,
For the
I
property owner,
am,
you're just losing your license.
obviously, am I just, you're right, am I
And
gonna
if-
lose my
And if
license?
you
What
continue
is
to do it,
the-
then you have penalties and or court.
Right, so I'm sure there's a legal process, but I don't know what. Anyway,
Okay.
I know a lot of question has come up with, about the ownership, and you can't make the ones that are renting
And where did the,
rooms owner.
I'm sorry? You can't.
You can't
Can't
have
require owner
owner
occupancy.
occupancy, you cannot require owner occupancy.
for a short-term rental? That's even for bed and breakfast?
I believe there's
B&B,
challenges
no,
to.
it's not
Right.
required either, owner or operator.
So where did the number of 100 come up? How did that,
Well, I mean, it says, I mean, the codes reads, the language reads, STRF permits shall be limited to 1% of the city's housing units
But you're saying
based
where,
on the latest
who came up with
American
that
survey.
percent?
So the
what
estimated,
was
I
the
guess,
thought behind the 1%?
I don't know. I can ask, I don't know,
I mean, they gotta come with some level.
I don't know.
I just don't know that 100 units is.
They might just,
It's
they
not a
gotta set
lot.
a level
It's
somewhere.
not a lot when you're gonna infuse. I mean, the
When you're
theory,
talking-
the theory is if you're infusing more housing. in the
Again, this
city,
is
the numbers go
only
up, you
the
have more.
portion of those that are full house,
Yeah.
okay?
True,
This is not,
full house.
I mean, the people who are snubbing their nose at the law certainly be found out because they'll be advertising on Airbnb.
Yeah, so this section has gone back and forth quite a few times, whether to allow them or not allow them, and how much restriction there should be, whether it takes away from residential housing units, whether it's important for tourism, there's all different sides to the argument here. So I think if you feel strongly about whether they should be allowed or not allowed or limits, that's something to think about, because it is
This is fine.
a topic. Okay.
Okay.
there are a lot of other sections in this 4. I don't know how much more we want to get into this evening. There's the emergency shelter boarding houses, transitional housing. Do you want to talk about the corner stores?
I was gonna bring that up, but I was
Okay.
waiting to the end.
Well, I mean, that's kind of in the next few pages here. Corner stores are on page 4.55.
I think shelters do.
Do you want to do,
I want to bring up transitional housing, emergency shelters, the zones that those are allowed in. Do we have chart?
yes,
What?
We get all the fun ones, next ones. We get the transitional housing, the emergency shelters,
Well, I'm just,
the adult
again, this
uses,
goes
the
back to
animal
single family
boarding.
neighborhoods, not that you're trying to keep things out, but usually when you have those type of services,
Yes,
you
so-
have employees
so if
or
you
work.
go back to your schedule, 3.6,
I can pull it up.
you have in lodging.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Right
They're
there.
all-
Yeah.
A lot of residential look like special permit.
Special
down.
permit.
Boarding houses are special use permit,
Here.
emergency shelters by special use permit.
Would you say transitional housing too, so. On this down here, so they're all special permit.
And then transitional.
So like the emergency shelter, is that something that like pops up periodically, like the Norfolk Center on Franklin Street, those types of that's the kind of stuff that's gonna have to cover special?
Well,
Well, the boarding house isn't allowed in some of the districts, but the emergency shelter, the transitional housing is.
see,
So you could have the county come in, purchase a house, make it an emergency shelter. And the question is, would they have parking requirements and things?
Would a county building?
emergency shelter, the definition is a facility whose primary purpose is to provide a temporary shelter for unhoused populations in general or for specific populations of the unhoused. and which does not require occupants to sign leases or occupancy agreements. Emergency shelters may include day and warming centers that do not provide overnight housing. So the church would be an emergency shelter, but the family of Woodstock is also an emergency shelter. Okay.
So they're still gonna come in for special permits.
But transitional, now let me read the definition of transitional.
Hi, how are you? Come on in.
Well, I just,
Yeah.
I wanna interrupt.
No,
I've been here
geez,
for a while.
This is so-
Hi.
Thank you for everything you guys
Well,
are doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Looking forward to hearing your comments. For us to get to work. Have a nice
All right, you too.
Nay, so transitional, the definition of that is a facility providing short-term housing, typically for less than 24 months, and appropriate supportive services to those in need to facilitate movement to an independent living. So I think family probably fits better into transitional. Right now, we don't have transitional housing. That's a new use in this code. So right now, Family of Woodstock is called an emergency shelter, but they probably fit more into that definition. But the transitional housing is limited to 14 residents. I don't
But
know.
wouldn't those be better served in like a T4 zone where you have more services and transportation? Walkability?
That's the walkability thing too.
That's what I mean, they have it in all the zones, but there's certain, again.
Right, and well, I think, also, they're not permitted by right, they're permitted by special permit. So in, citing them and in reviewing them, I think
You would
you,
look at-
obviously, that's something you look at.
Let me
Just
think
to
that
say, look at one specific location where T3 might be, right now allocated. It doesn't say that all of the places where T3 are bad spots. There might be some positive locations and, I don't know. I don't know it necessarily.
But that's what the special use permit process would look at.
Yeah,
Resident
you look
input,
at, yeah,
transportation,
right. No, I would
employees,
support it.
parking.
Is that, a suitable site? Is it realistic,
I got you.
They're not just permitting them, right? So I think there's that, a little bit that oversight is there.
Now, bed and breakfasts, that's a permitted right in all zones again.
Right.
So a bed and breakfast, let's say you have a home in a residential neighborhood that's 6 bedrooms. Does that mean you have 6 people?
B&Bs are limited to 5 bedrooms,
Okay, so 5 bedrooms.
5 room, yeah.
So you could have,
Which I think is what we have, or we have 4
I think
now.
it's 4.
I think we have 4
5
now,
plus,
but
more
they're
or less.
allowed in all the zones.
right.
So again, you could have 5 sets of people coming and going on a daily basis with 5 cars plus the person that's running the B&B.
Right,
And is there any?
which would be, there has to be a resident on,
Well-
on premises 24 hours.
And are there-
So you've got to have, it's either the property owner or their
Now, does,
representative.
how are the dwellings now identified? Is it,
Well-
in a bed and breakfast? Like, how many cars, like, for Alicia place? What was the?
I think the requirement now is 1 per room.
I think it's 1 per room, yeah, I don't. We
See, I
haven't
think
done a bed and
I think the
breakfast.
3 things in T3 should be by special permit. Because then you can take into consideration parking, employees, how you fit everybody.
So so you're talking so the bed and breakfasts where they're allowed in T3 should be by special permit versus
Permit.
a regular permit. Okay,
And also, Sue, the parking that we just talked about in minimums.
okay. Do you want, so I would say then the T3s and the T2, anything
Well, you can't build T two.
Well, I mean, it's a use that's
Yeah,
identified, you know,
yes.
And in the new code is the parking requirements waived with that thing too? With the bed and
For
breakfast?
lodging, yeah. I think
Lodging is no
Yeah.
requirement.
There's no requirement for lodging.
I think we need to do something with that.
Citywide, you're saying, or,
For bed, yeah, for bed and breakfasts.
In the,
but are you talking
but we're
just in, are you, I would think that in like the T5s and the T4s, that
Okay,
it wouldn't be,
so just
I
with the
mean,
T
you're
three.
talking about more of your commercial main
well,
street.
just
But
to,
T4, maybe
yeah,
not.
I mean, let's just review what T4 is, just so you.
T4 and-
Because T4 and
Well, is a leach in a T4 on Fair Street?
T4 and O are not necessarily currently I mean, you're talking about this area, this area, this area, generally single or two-family districts now, I would say.
Alicia looks like she might be in a T3 and looks like the historic,
Where's Fair?
Alicia's in
Fair,
a T,
T4.
yeah.
and she's blue, T
Well,
four.
she's on, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Is she in that?
Yeah, she's in that, I think.
Or she could be in
Uh,
here, I don't know.
No.
No, she's here, right?
She's there. That's the
Yeah,
one.
okay, so she's a T4N.
T four, and I can make my building a B and B.
So what are your thoughts, I mean, with the parking for VPs?
I think, again, that should be a special permit, because, I mean, if they can provide the parking, great, they can have the use, but remember all the people that complain on Fair Street about
I
parking?
know, but I mean, do we, yeah, we have a
What happens
special
if you
permit.
have, what happens if you have three more B and Bs that go in?
No, I'm just saying that we'll ask for a special permit to be considered by the council. But we also need to put some language in about parking too.
Well, I mean, I think sometimes you can do that through the special permit process. You know, again, if you have nobody complaining, you can allow it, but if the whole neighborhood shows up and complains about parking, then that could be a consideration for denial of a special permit. If nobody complains, then you can allow it. And I don't have any problem allowing the uses if the neighborhoods don't mind it. But it's when they come out with pitchforks,
Know that you
I'm just,
can legitimately deny it because neighbors complain. that
well,
there's
it's,
no
but it's
parking.
more, well,
I'm just saying,
no, I understand, but parking's always seems to be the problem.
right,
That's the number one complaint.
But if we don't attach a parking requirement to it, if they come for a special permit, they can say, I don't need to have parking.
Okay. How many, but what do you do? Have one spot for every
One per
bedroom?
unit.
Well, then you're gonna have some that say, well, I flew and I don't have a car. But I mean, we're not next to a major metropolitan airport, so I mean, most people are driving.
well, we could think of.
I mean,
it.
instead of one per unit, I mean, you could always do like half or three
Let's
quarters.
just say half.
Yeah, I mean, so
I
you
mean,
count them up.
the maximum on the one is 1.5 per guest room. I mean, you could do the minimum at half a
A
space per
minimum of
guest
one
room.
and a half a unit for up to 5. I know we're splitting hairs here now.
No, but I mean, I don't think that if you have a 6-unit B and B that you need 6 spaces, but I think you need at least 4.
I mean, if you did half a space per guest room, you're at 3.
I think that's reasonable.
If you do a
You're gonna
minimum
put a couple
of,
on the street, you're gonna put a couple indoors, maybe somebody has a car, maybe
So
somebody
you do a
doesn't.
minimum of 1? Because we're gonna have 5 units, right?
But if you have a minimum of one per unit, that's
No,
fine.
minimum of one
I'm
for
saying
the,
minimum of one and then
for the,
a half
for the
per guest room.
facility.
Yeah.
And then a half of one.
I agree with that.
One space plus,
A half per every unit.
right,
2.5 spaces.
I think that's fair to a neighborhood.
And we're talking,
one for the,
Across the
one for the
board?
innkeeper plus,
I think that's what he's saying.
I'm just asking because if, you know, you've got other forms of lodging too.
But the
B&Bs
owners are required to be there. Right?
Well, the owner or operator is supposed to be there 24-hour, yeah.
on a
Yeah,
short-term
B&B.
rental,
No.
Oh. on a B&B.
Okay.
Well, lodging again also should have,
So they,
Well, it says supportive services for 24 hours. They don't have to be on site. They can
I
be,
guess, yeah, I don't know, it's
operator shall be
on the
premise
premises
to check in and be available
and
for
be available.
work services.
So
24
they should have a
hours.
space that they can pull into if necessary, so one space for the owner
I like the one
operator
and then a half for every unit.
plus a half for every unit.
So you got two right off the bat.
yeah,
And that's for bed and breakfast specifically, not all lodging or something, not.
Well, let's look at the other lodging would be,
What are the other lodging types?
Well, lodging includes hotels
that's,
and
I'm just talking about.
B&Bs.
well, a hotel, I mean, we made Blake a little, he had a little parking for all of his hotels.
And I think that's where you
can
get
all
into
lodging-
that other,
Can all
Yeah, that
lodging go into
other
the residential
strategy.
districts though? I think that's what
Talking
we're mainly
about-
concerned about.
what is your anticipated use? How are you gonna deal with that? In his case, he created a had
agree.
a parking lot, and he's doing valet parking, and he's,
That's why I like that
common-
formula that you were,
right, so that, I
Right,
think
so-
that takes care of the larger facilities.
And also, if you're talking about hotels, what you're asking is that hotels are only permitted in
Right, so
T5 and
Yeah.
T4.
if we're,
T5 districts, which are pretty heavily commercial, and the T4 MS, which is that
Which is the main
section on
street, yeah.
Delaware Avenue.
if we're just concerned about that T3 and T2 district, then I think it's just primarily, is it just primarily B&Bs for lodging in that district?
no, we're doing just B&Bs across the board. That's parking.
B and Bs across the board, B and Bs
But
are
not
only by
all.
special permit in your, right? You only wanted the B and Bs by special permit in the T3s and the T2.
Correct, but then.
But
we
across
talk
the
about parking.
board, you're talking about the parking, okay, I got it, that's how I wrote it, so I just wanna make
Yep.
sure, okay.
The other thing that we've encountered in our current code is the difference between a bed and breakfast and a boarding house. So you
Right.
might just wanna look at the differences between what would, boarding house would be special permit under this code. See, currently, they're both special permit.
Boarding house is, will require
But
special
Bed and
permits.
breakfasts are limited to 5 bedrooms, boarding houses are limited to 10 bedrooms. So boarding houses can be a little bit larger. In the current code, I think if you don't fall under the B&B, you could almost apply for a boarding house.
Right,
Both at special permit, so this is a little bit different than that. But I guess that's just a consideration, although now they have operations plan and everything too.
there's also distance requirements, which
Yeah.
isn't much, it's 500 feet, but
From each
That's-
one, right?
I think now it's 1,200 feet, you can't, if you have a boarding house, right? I think
There's
now
no-
you have to be 1,200 feet from
Right.
another.
There's nothing in this code, though, is there?
Now it's 500 feet. Parcel line to parcel line between boarding house facilities. But I think it's 12 now.
I don't know that that's. Never understood.
We're talking B&Bs too?
No,
Okay, just.
no, well,
B and B's had the
Had
distance
it.
now, but now they're doing away with it.
right,
And I'm okay with that, because if you have one B and B, two B and B, that's fine.
okay. Do we want to look at
Corner stores?
corner stores? This is, yeah. Or do you want to, I mean, are we done with shelters, boarding houses, transition houses? We're done with those.
So my understanding is on bed and breakfasts, in the T3 zone, instead of the permitted uses, you're gonna have by special permit
That would be a recommendation, yes, and T2. Yep,
and T2, yes.
Not in Alicia's zone, but T4?
No.
Okay.
No, that's up down, that's the business. I don't think. Can you just bring up, Kyla, or maybe I can, what is
Okay.
the T zone that's orange?
T zone that's orange,
T3?
that's T3.
Sorry. Where are the T? That's downtown.
Oh, you want the bright orange?
No, the orange, that's mostly Albany Avenue.
The T3NO you're talking about? This,
Yeah.
this darker orange?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, that, you just want to see that?
That's mostly Albany Avenue.
Albany Avenue.
Albany, and then
And I
up on East Chester Street, and then it looks like the Boulevard. And T3 and, what is that one on? Is that the,
It's like a little island?
that's that the scene, that's gotta be the Mountain Valley Manor
Yeah.
parcel.
Oh, maybe.
There was another one too there, right?
No, it's not.
That's the strip right before the Mountain Valley Manor.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Yes.
Well, that is Mountain Valley Manor, right?
No,
This
it's
right
not.
here.
Those are a strip of single-family houses right there.
Across from the city dump.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. I don't know.
Future
Why
development.
would that be T3NO?
What is, let me just look at what T3NO means here.
It's large parcel. It's those large, it's those large parcel areas.
I don't know why that would even,
Whoever, maybe they own all that entire section.
I don't know, that's a weird. Unless they meant to do the Mountain Valley Manor.
What's the other one over there in the avenues?
Yeah, T3NO.
That is the one, the vacant piece by
Riccardi's.
Riccardi's, I think. Oh, and Riccardi's.
So it's
Yeah.
probably for future development, if somebody wants to come in and knock all those things down, and
I don't know, it just doesn't seems weird to
the
me.
one down on Wilbur I'm talking about.
Yeah, what's this?
And what's the one up on Westchester? That's the carriage house, right? The coach house?
Coach House Flyers. And then there's one out here.
This is like spot zoning at its best.
Who wants all of these large properties?
On Quarry Street, is that, that's,
Those are the dentist offices.
Yeah, that's the dentist's office. These are kind
Okay,
of
so
weird.
it's-
I think for future
I
development.
wonder if they're currently zoned something and that's what automatically just
Populated.
flipped them that way?
It might be just the spacing of
Size or-
buildings between and what it could look like at a facility one of the
There's some
development
weird,
later.
The corner stores. This goes back to our neighborhoods that are single family. Do we want corner stores? Do we want them by special permit, or do we not want them at all? I'll be honest with you, my neighborhood doesn't need corner stores because my neighborhood is only 2 blocks wide along the Albany Avenue commercial district.
But we would
Mine
have,
has two already, so it doesn't, I mean, it doesn't bother me as a whole. I mean, literally within walking distance from my house, there's Stewart's. And there's the old pizza place, which was was DeBella's, which could very easily be converted into a corner store, which was probably a corner store at one time. So it doesn't make a hill, you know, to me, it doesn't make a hill of beans difference, you know what I mean?
I guess like you, with your neighborhood, you could have a lot of corner stores up by you.
Well, in the T3s and in T4, and it's the eating, drinking establishment is by commercial, is by special permit.
Well, corner stores
Are permitted by right.
are permitted in T3N and T3NO, not in the T3L.
But only to serve the immediate nearby residential areas.
Right,
I think T3N and T3O should either be no corner stores or special permit. Let the neighborhoods decide.
How many don't have a corner store? I feel like every neighborhood in Kingston,
There's never
Has a
been one
corner
sort of like that.
There's none by you, there's none by you. The only thing you have is Terry's. But
Terry's is technically a corner store.
Correct, but that's the only one, but under this legislation, every corner
Oh,
will
totally.
be a store in a
I mean-
residential neighborhood.
75% of Kingston already has a corner store, whether it's a Stewart's,
Oh, I agree.
whether it's Terry's, whether it's.
Well, that, and I have a corner store, I mean, literally, I walk to Stewart's for an ice cream cone, but that's in the Albany Avenue Business District, therefore I don't need a corner store.
And you'll never get one because Stewart's is close enough.
Correct, but there's no definition of what a corner store is,
Right.
so in theory, anybody can take a house on a corner and put it.
Oh, true.
Well, corner stores don't have to be on a corner.
They don't have to be on a corner, it could just be.
Yeah, corner store is just
It's
a,
just a rudimentary name.
but I mean, in order for someone to put one in, I would think they would want.
There would have to be a-
guarantee it'd be worth their while.
Yeah, there would have to be a demand, there would have
it's
to
a
be a need.
retail or service use.
So if somebody buys a house in a single family neighborhood and decides to put an office in there.
I don't think office is service because
What
it
about
says
massage?
upper floors may contain residential or general office.
So a
What's
corner
the
store
service use?
definition is,
Like a barber shop,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
you know, I'm just saying, it's,
Oh, massage parlor, barber shop, food, dentist.
I don't think it
Doctor.
can be food, I don't think it can be food, because it says, I think food can only take up, eating and drinking, I think can only
well,
be,
food would be retail, you're
20%.
talking restaurant.
But then you
Yeah.
also, that would be covered under a special permit.
Hot shop?
Well, that's another.
well, no, hot shop I think has to be, that's a totally different permit.
I'm just telling you, this is gonna be your code for the next 20
So what
years.
is your proposal?
I don't think in residential neighborhoods you should have,
Well, I mean, you've got places that already have these buildings, like down on West Pierpont
They
Street.
serve a purpose, I mean, they do. I mean, you know, maybe the special permit thing
I don't
is
want my neighbor,
something to think about.
I don't want my neighbor in a residential, single-family neighborhood to sell their house, and somebody decide to put a business in next to it. I live in a residential neighborhood. If I want to live next to the few commercial businesses that are in town that have been here forever, then I would have chosen a house next to one of those businesses. I'm gonna be honest, I'm just put it out there. And I think there's a lot of people that own single-family houses that feel the same way. I mean, I personally would never live next to Terry's and have cars in and out all the time. But people that bought those houses, bought next to Terry's because
They
it's
know,
been there
it's like
forever.
buying next to an airport.
They know,
You know what?
exactly. But under this code, you're now introducing businesses into residential neighborhoods, and I don't agree with it.
So,
So we're thinking,
Like-
you're thinking special permit in the T3 areas.
what's West
I'm
Pierpont?
getting no in TV
What's-
areas.
what's what?
What zone is West Pierpont Street where they want to have that store down there, that coffee shop?
I think that might be T3L.
On West Pier.
No, add T4.
and
T4N, so they would be fine.
That would be over by, T4N. And what is Terry's area?
Terry's?
Oh, that's probably T3, yeah,
T3.
but it's been there for 60
Okay.
years.
But some
There's
neighbors.
Emerson right there, no, it's a T,
T3.
it's a T4N,
Oh,
so
it's a
Jack Street,
T4.
not a T3N.
Okay.
don't think a T3N should have.
Or what about where Farber's was, O'Neill and.
That's all T4.
Okay,
T
T4.
four N.
But can some of the T3s,
Oh,
You start to get to T3N in your house after house after house.
yeah,
So you're gonna do a conversion. If it's not already there now, it's gonna be a conversion.
okay.
Well, you know, there was one, isn't there one up in this area that used to be, there were corners?
Now you got Fox
That's
Hill
where
there, which is.
Mark Riker's house is there,
It's got the ground floor.
it used to be Forrest's Deli,
We got the one on the
Shop.
corner of Henry Street,
that was on,
That's
Clifton and
TN.
Sylvester.
is that TN4?
So that's a T3N, Clifton and Sylvester.
But again, it's a pre-existing use.
No, I know.
No, I mean, it's, yeah, it's not that way now, right? I mean, it's
No,
been
it's
used as-
converted.
You got the one on the corner of Henry Street, you got the one on,
but
Wall
I don't
Street.
see them popping up at every corner, or any, I mean, like in, I don't see them just being something that happens,
But if you allow it, it could happen.
you gotta think about, I mean, if there's a successful Stewart's a block away, is it
So
a
then why do you-
realistic
Then
business
why do you need it?
venture?
Why do you need it?
Well, I'm just saying,
I'm
you're
just
citing
saying,
these
if
things,
the-
you're gonna be looking at, you're gonna be looking
Yeah,
at.
I mean, if
something.
someone added like a little hair salon in their house on the corner. I
And
mean,
there,
that
one
would
went
be-
on Harding Avenue, the neighbors screamed about it, because they had people in and out, cars parked all over the street in a residential neighborhood, somebody put it in the basement. People
So
were screaming about it.
if part of the definition is, it says it primarily serves the immediate nearby residential areas.
My opinion is that T3N neighborhoods are already serviced by the T4s and the commercial districts. Therefore, there's not an underwhelming need for it in those neighborhoods.
So preclude that from T3N?
Or consider
That's my
special
opinion.
Or a
permit.
special permit,
My opinion is it should be precluded.
I think special permit.
I think you're opening the door for residential houses to get converted into businesses. Or people living in the houses running businesses out of them.
No, that's something to think about.
I'm just-
There's only 3 of you here, so we're gonna have.
No,
to
I'm just looking at some of the other T3Ns, I mean,
And this goes back to the common council member that was here last meeting.
or
that
can we
said-
do a special permit with a parking requirement if they're in residential districts, so people aren't, so we're not clogging up streets?
Well, I mean, that kind of counter,
It counterbalances
Well, yeah,
it's
but I think
counterintuitive for
But
a corner
because,
store,
right, it's
yes.
supposed to serve it's supposed
Right,
to be a
But if,
walkable
but if you look at those
type
neighborhoods,
thing.
the T4, the T3N, none of those neighborhoods are that large, you can't walk to the end of the street and you're in a T4 neighborhood.
what is the Looney
Everyone-
Tunes Saloon? Let's look up that one.
Every one,
I know we're getting out of here soon. I just want to see what that zone is.
That is on.
It's on
Technically
Chester,
Chester,
and
and
Lincoln.
if you come around Hooker Street,
T3 and
yeah, T3 and
Okay, so, all right.
Actually, so is this gas station. This is a.
and Mickey's Igloo,
Yeah.
Sunoco.
Those,
that's
I think,
Gallagher's and Mickey's
those
Igloo.
were NB districts before, I think, right? Maybe neighborhood business.
I do agree with some of the T3s
They're all surrounded,
don't.
they're all surrounded by businesses and
I
business
don't know
districts.
that all of them are that way.
Look at them, Sue. Everyone
I
has,
haven't-
everyone has a blue one across from it, other than way up on Grandview Avenue or Lounsbury.
I think part of it too is opening up for people to allow them to bring income into their home too. Like if you wanna open a salon, you might not be able to afford rent to open a hair salon, but you could convert a room in your house and have people stop in and get a haircut. I mean, I don't know.
Again, that goes
You know.
back to people bought in a single-family neighborhood. If they wanted businesses next to them, they would have bought in a T4, or they would have bought in a,
But some of these people,
Commercial.
the only way they can afford to keep
Neighborhood.
their house is to.
Yeah, I mean,
you're
these
talking about
are
people that-
these are businesses that are run by the president of the, I mean, maybe that's the thing, is that they be,
In conjunction
you
with
know,
the,
in conjunction with a residence.
I don't think it's fair to a neighbor to live in a
And I-
single-family neighborhood and have somebody buy a house next door, convert it into a business, and now they're stuck living next to a business when they bought in a single-family neighborhood. They would have bought in a more industrial or more
but some of your
dense
neighbors
neighborhood.
might not be able to afford to stay in that house unless they have some sort of income coming in. I mean, you're also talking about the flip side of that, is that some of these things are to allow people to stay in their home.
I understand, but how's that fair to the neighbor next door that paid money for their house that now doesn't have the same value because there's a business next to it, because there's cars coming and going all the time? So one taxpayer gets profit, but the other one loses money?
Well, I mean, that could be anything. I mean, you could let your house
That's
become
why you
like
set
run
up-
down and. be
That's
the
why you
same
have
type
zones,
situation.
people pick where they wanna live.
Well, people pick where they wanna live, people pick where they can afford to live. I live on First Avenue now because that's my dream home, but that's where I could afford it. You know, I mean, not
I picked
everybody
my
gets to
neighborhood,
pick.
again, when I bought my house, it's because I could afford it, but I picked it because it was in a single-family neighborhood. I
Right,
did
but
not
now a
wanna
lot
be
of
next
people
to a
wouldn't be
business.
able to afford a house in that neighborhood, or, you know, wouldn't be able to afford a house in any of these neighborhoods.
Look, I'm
I mean,
gonna
I don't,
disagree.
you know,
We'll bring this up for discussion at the.
yeah, I would
Well,
say
it's
there's
a,
three
it's a
of
point,
you.
I
I mean, it's just
wrote
not
it
my
as
responsibility to supplement somebody
options.
else at my cost.
Just by looking at the map, I tend to agree that a business like a corner store, I can't see it happening in the.
But I think the thing that, right, so the corner store includes other, it's not
I know.
like a
Correct.
Terry's on every corner, I mean, I just, so I think maybe
It could
you
be a
gotta think
personal
about that
trainer, it could
too.
be-
And
But you
maybe
still have people
adjusting.
coming
I
and
know.
going and traffic and people, that's,
Yeah, but
it's a
if
business.
if you're living in your house and you're doing a beauty salon and you're gonna cut hair, you're gonna have one person, you're one person, you're not gonna have 15 cars there, you're gonna cut somebody's hair, they're gonna leave, you're gonna have another person.
Every 15 minutes, a car's gonna come, park, door opens, door slams, person goes inside, person comes out, everyone's yakking, person gets in the car, leaves, next car pulls in, and this cycle repeats all day long. As you're in your single-family neighborhood sitting on your patio in the back. You didn't buy next to a business. So right now, with this new zoning code, the existing businesses are there, the residents know what's there. By pushing this through, you're now converting neighborhoods to what people did not expect. I can understand a push for housing, but not a push for commercial purpose.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
if that's, you know,
That's what you're doing.
but you don't want housing or commercial purpose, you don't want.
No, we
anybody
said
to-
that accessory dwellings are fine as long as they meet the parking requirements and they meet the bulk, the size requirements on the property. But I don't believe that single-family neighborhoods should be taking on commercial businesses.
Okay,
All right,
I guess we'll
Okay.
put it,
But you have to see what the rest of the board thinks. But I mean, that's the biggest complaint that I've heard from people around town, myself, and I've heard it from other people, that, hey, I live in a residential neighborhood. I want to keep it residential. That's why I bought my house in a residential neighborhood. If I wanted to be next to a business, I would have bought in uptown Kingston on Wall Street, or I would have bought downtown next to mixed-use commercial or mixed-use. People pick different neighborhoods for different reasons. It's based on wants, likes, dislikes,
or
and
wait,
quality, and basically the different types of quality of life. What do you want? Some people want to walk uptown to the farmer's market, other people don't.
all right. I don't know, what time is it? It's 8:45. I guess we'll call it a night. We'll be looking at another session. I don't know what calendars look like. We really, some supplement, I don't know if we can talk about any more bonus heights, but we need to do the street design and the usable open space standards. So we're gonna wanna start talking about those maybe at the next one. And maybe large site, I don't know, we can send out those sections, 5, 6, and 7.
We're also gonna have to circle back to a lot of these topics.
Well, I think, yeah, that would be the fourth workshop. I don't see that we're gonna get done in a third.
I mean, what are you thinking for the next street design, open space, large?
Yeah, I'm thinking 5 and 6, and I'll throw 7 in. I don't know that there's gonna be a lot of discussion about that, though.
That's what we talk about Wolford's, then, right?
Yeah, to use that word.
As long as I get to have chickens now, I'm happy.
Chickens, no roosters.
We can have chickens now, we can't have roosters. I want
So
roosters.
the next is, and,
Really? Yeah, oh, if they did, yeah.
150 square foot chicken coop. I'm good.
5:30 every morning.
Oh, there is one?
Yeah, the guy with the nut that keeps
we,
chopping trees down.
next week, I don't know. We have already. Do we have anything next week?
You also have a holiday coming up.
I'm off Monday, we have a tree commission on Tuesday.
Right, Monday. Then the and then we have the tree commission
20th is a holiday.
Tuesday. I'd have to look at the other calendars going on too, but then we've also got,
Next week is back.
the planning board the following week, our regular board. So maybe at our regular board meeting, we'll look at scheduling another, the third workshop.
Yeah,
So.
when does the common council start their
We haven't set dates for them yet to start their sessions.
They're not expecting to have these comments back in advance
No,
of doing those?
no, we talked about that today.
Okay.
They'll be working in tandem. All right. So probably the week after our February meeting. I'll try and get answers to you on your other questions. Okay, I guess we will adjourn.
Yeah.